A little while ago, we here at Team TripleJump released a video titled 101 Worst Video Games of All Time, and you guys turned out in your literal millions to point and laugh at the most egregious games that the world has ever seen. However, whilst awful titles are a lot of fun, every so often it is nice to kick back with a game that's actually half decent. I know, it's shocking that we don't spend all of our time playing utterly plops video games, but it's true, and actually, most of the time we prefer titles that are, good. But which games are the crème de la crème, the top of the heap, the best of the best? To work that out, we're going to need a big list.
For today's mega countdown, we've trawled the archives of both Metacritic and game rankings in order to figure out which bits of interactive digital entertainment are the greatest ever made. In order to qualify for a spot on the list, a game must have received a minimum of 7 professional reviews. This is basically to ensure enough professional opinions have been registered in order for an average review score to actually mean something. No solitary superfans here giving 100% to something that no one else has ever played. Unlike in our best games of X year top 10 videos, we will be allowing ports and re-releases here. However, we'll only include one version of each game, and that version will be whichever has the highest review score of them all. So if a port is better than the title it's ported from, the port will make the list instead of the original. Controversial. Remasters and remakes are also allowed, though remasters will only get a spot separate from the original if the two games are different enough. Looking at you, The Last of Us Remastered, you're not getting 2 entries. Additionally, collections have been reviewed on a case-by-case basis, and have been given a pass if they bring something new to the table, rather than just being several games stacked up inside a trench coat.
Finally, like our 101 worst games list, these entries are ranked and have been done so based on their average review scores, taken from both Metacritic and game rankings. If the two aggregators have a difference in opinion, then we've gone for whichever site awarded a game with the higher average review score. Finally, when several games have the same review score, we've simply ranked them in the same order as the aggregators. As they're not in alphabetical order, we assume there's some complex algorithm sorting them by decimals or number of reviews or something else. And we trust that Metacritic and game rankings know what they're doing, so we'll stick with their logic. Luckily, the title in the number 1 spot has a distinct score all of its very own, so we will soon be finding out definitively what video game is the GOAT.
Is all of that nice and clear? Well, let's get to it then. I'm Ben.
I'm Peter.
And I'm Ashton from TripleJump, and here are the 101 best video games of all time.
Number 101, Sid Meier's Civilization 4, 2005, PC, 94%. Bloody hell, the game in the 101 spot got an average review score of 94%. Just imagine how good the games at the top of this list are. Released in 2005, Sid Meier's Civilization 4 is, as the name would suggest, the 4th title in Firaxis Games' venerable Civilization series, hitting PCs some 4 years after its predecessor, Civilization 3. Like those that came before it, Civ 4 is an empire-building, turn-based strategy title where the aim is to build a civilization. Like in the title, from limited resources and ultimately fulfill one of the win criteria. Conquer everyone else, control a majority of the land and population, send a ship to the Alpha Centauri system, increase the culture rating of your cities, or win the UN's most popular leader contest, which I sincerely hope is a thing in real life. What do you mean they're all terrible? Players start out with very little and must carefully utilize their resources, explore the world, and expand their empire by making strategic decisions. What's more is that when they get tired of playing against the computer, they can rope in some friends and have fun competing to be the greatest conqueror. Civ 4 was a hit, both with critics and with fans of the turn-based strategy genre. It balanced familiarity with innovation perfectly, giving players an experience based on tried and true mechanics, but with a shiny new 3D engine, clever AI opponents, and ultra-polished graphics. Alas, this Civ is not the greatest Civ of all time. We'll get to that one in a bit. Number 100, God of War, 2005, PS2, 94%. Without spoiling things too heavily, this isn't the only visit that this list will be getting from hunky boy Kratos, as no fewer than 3 God of War titles have garnered good enough average review scores to earn them a spot on this list. What are the other 2? Well, there's God of War... just kidding, you'll have to stick around to see the others, won't you? You cheat! Anyway, the original God of War, released in 2005, introduced the world to Kratos, who at the time was not the eponymous God of War. That title was taken by his nemesis Ares, the malevolent deity responsible for the deaths of Kratos' wife and daughter. Although Kratos, he did it. But yeah, it's Kratos' fault. Being the unforgiving sort that he is, Kratos is none too pleased about this and sets out on a quest to find Pandora's box, which will allow him to stop Ares once and for all and achieve the vengeance he so desperately craves. Gameplay largely consists of combo-based combat using the Blades of Chaos, Kratos' signature weapon. However, there are some platforming sections and puzzles sprinkled in there to keep things varied and interesting. God of War 05 floored critics with its tight, addictive gameplay, ridiculously over-the-top, gory violence, and stunning graphics. The game's compelling story also garnered heaps of praise, with one reviewer saying that God of War was the best thing to happen to Greek mythology since Harry Hamlin played Perseus in Clash of Titans. I can't say I'm sure who Harry Hamlin is, but I assume that's high praise indeed. Number 99. NCAA Football 2004, 2003, PS2, 94%. Oh yeah, here we go, sports time! I've played an American football game before. Here come the block men. But I've never played an American college football game, so I'm going to give this everything I've got. Thought I'd treat you to a proper one before the cynicism kicks in and I can't be bothered anymore. Don't expect this for every sports title on the list, and go and buy yourself a shirt, TripleJumpShop.com. For those of you wondering, NCAA stands for National Collegiate Athletic Association, and as such you can probably work out that NCAA Football 2004 focuses on college-level hand-egg. Released in 2003, NCAA Football 2004 simulates what it's like to play American football as a college student, but without the exams, frat parties, and massive debt. The game plays quite similarly to its predecessors, so players control the players as they dart about the gridiron and attempt to score touchdowns. The roster of players is updated for the 2003 to 2004 season, and players can rename the sports stars and even create their own team. Within just 2 weeks of its release, NCAA Football 2004 had sold 500,000 copies, and critics were queuing up to bestow praise upon the game. The controls were lauded, as were the graphics, sound, gameplay, and attention to detail that made fans feel like they were really at a game. If you were into college football in 2004 and didn't fancy getting your face broken by some burly tight end, then there really was no better way to experience the sport. Number 98. Metal Gear Solid 4 Guns of the Patriots, 2008, PS3, 94%. Oh, we really hope you like the work of Hideo Kojima, because this is the first of not 2, not 3, but 6 Metal Gear Solid entries on this list. If you don't like Hideo Kojima, then, I don't know, stick your fingers in your ears every time an MGS game pops up. Don't worry, we'll tell you when we're done. The least good MGS title on today's list is 2008's Metal Gear Solid 4 Guns of the Patriots, though, in fairness, saying it's the least good Metal Gear Solid game is like saying that mint choc chip is the least good ice cream flavor, because at the end of the day, you're still getting ice cream. Guns of the Patriots focuses its attention on a prematurely aged Solid Snake, now known as Old Snake, as he heads out on one final mission to try to assassinate Liquid Snake before Liquid is able to take control of the Sons of the Patriots. Stealth is the word in any MGS title, and Guns of the Patriots is no different, so players will have to plan their movements carefully, utilizing close quarters combat where necessary if there's any hope of beating the game. Although it's technically the worst numbered Metal Gear Solid, well, if you exclude Ground Zeroes anyway, Guns of the Patriots is still one of the greatest stealth games of all time. Reviewers were mightily impressed with the gameplay and controls, the wide variety of set pieces, the artistic achievements of the developers, and the stunning score, which was compared favorably to that of Hollywood blockbuster movies. Oh right, you Kojima haters can take your fingers out of your ears now! They can't hear me. Number 97. God of War Ragnarok, 2022. PS5, 94%. Our second visit from hunky boy Kratos comes to us from the distant past of 2022. Indeed, one of the more recent titles to make this list is God of War Ragnarok, the follow-up to 2018's God of War. In this Norse-themed sequel, players join Kratos and his son, Atreus, as they face the titular Ragnarok, the approaching apocalyptic event triggered by the death of Baldur at the end of the previous game. In terms of its gameplay, Ragnarok is much like its predecessor, so players will find themselves guiding Kratos and Atreus around the 9 realms from a third-person perspective, perspective, utilizing combo-based attacks to fend off enemies and solving puzzles in order to progress. Reviewers could find little in the way of fault with the game, and although some were frustrated with the excessive hints given to players during the puzzle segments, overall they were very pleased with the title. The characters felt fleshed out and complex, the level design was top-notch, the tweaks made to the shield mechanics were welcome, and the audio-visual presentation was near flawless. Furthermore, critics agreed that Ragnarok presented players with interesting takes on well-known mythological figures, which prevented things from feeling stale, and overall the title felt like a fitting end to Kratos' brush with the Norse gods. We do have to wonder though where he'll turn up next. Wouldn't mind seeing him take on the Egyptian gods. Boss battle with Anubis? Yes please. Number 96. Metal Gear Solid 3 Subsistence, 2005. PS2. 94%. More Metal Gear goodness for you now as we turn our attention to Metal Gear Solid 3 Subsistence, an expanded version of Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater that was originally released in Japan in 2005 before making its way to the rest of the world the following year. The game's main story takes place over 30 years prior to the events of 1987's Metal Gear and focuses on Fox operative Naked Snake. He has rather a lot on his plate as he must save rocket scientist Nikolai Stepanovich Sokolov, tamper with an experimental superweapon, and assassinate his former boss. In addition to everything that came with Snake Eater, Subsistence also included ports of Metal Gear and Metal Gear 2 Solid Snake, an online multiplayer mode, and a 3D player-controlled camera in the main part of the game. There was so much content, in fact, that the title had to be split over 2 discs. Snake Eater had already attained universal critical acclaim, garnering an average review score of 91 out of 100, and reviewers of Subsistence agreed that the expanded edition was an improvement on the original in every way. Everything they liked about Snake Eater, i.e. the graphics, protagonist and story, was still there, and they welcomed the addition of the 2 ports and the online multiplayer. Put simply, if Snake Eater was a nice mug of hot chocolate, Subsistence was the deluxe hot choc that came with squirty cream, marshmallows and a shot of Baileys. Yum. Oh, and don't worry, haters, there isn't any more Kojima for quite a while. Number 95. Diablo, 1997. PC, 94%. We're taking a wee trip to the kingdom of Honduras now as we turn our attention to Blizzard's PC-exclusive RPG, Diablo. Players take on the role of a lone hero who must battle the forces of evil and save the mortal realm from the legions of hell who are controlled by the eponymous Diablo. Across 16 randomly generated levels, the player must fight off monsters, acquire new items, and learn fancy new abilities, all to prepare themselves for the fiercest of battles, the skirmish against the Lord of Terror himself. Gameplay is relatively standard RPG fare. The player gets to choose from one of 3 classes, Rogue, Warrior, or Sorcerer, and heads out into the world to kill a variety of enemies, which grants experience points that allow the PC to level up. There is also a smorgasbord of items available, ranging in quality from common all the way up to legendary, so if you're something of a loot goblin, you're in for a wild time. Diablo was both a critical and commercial success, selling over 2.5 million units by mid-2001. There were a number of reasons it went down so well, but the main ones were its addictive gameplay, polished visuals, and the broad selection of items and monsters that added replay value to the title. You might even go so far as to say that it was one hell of a game. Do you get it? Because Diablo is from hell. Number 94. Burnout 3 Takedown, 2004. Xbox, 94%. Beep beep, mother flumpers! It's time to fasten those seatbelts, check those mirrors are positioned correctly, and put the pedal part way to the metal for safety, because it's time to look at the first driving game on our list. Are you excited? I know I am. Patreon.com/Team TripleJump. Burnout 3 Takedown isn't like other driving games though, you know, the stuffy sort that punish players for stupid things like crashing into other cars and causing thousands of dollary-doos in property damage. No sir! Burnout 3 Takedown actually rewards the player for risky maneuvers, offering speed boosts for drifting around corners, narrowly missing other vehicles and driving into oncoming traffic. It's perfect if you're like our writer and couldn't tell a carburettor from a carbonara. Oh, no, I'm being told that's not actually true. That is one thing our writer knows. It's a pasta. The game was a huge success, both critically and commercially, shifting almost 2.5 million units by mid-2006 and earning itself lots of shiny accolades, including a golden joystick and no less than 3 BAFTAs. Critics liked more or less everything about the game, including the takedown system, and several claimed that it was one of the greatest racing games ever made. Not only is Burnout 3 Takedown the highest scoring Burnout title, but it's also the best racing game on the original Xbox. I doff my hat to you, Burnout 3 Takedown, or I would if I hadn't broken all of my limbs in a fiery car crash. If anyone needs me, I'll be in A and E. Number 93. Resident Evil Code Veronica, 2000. Dreamcast, 94%. The first Resident Evil title to make today's list is 2000's Resident Evil Code Veronica, a game where the only thing higher than its average review score is the number of punctuation marks in its title. A colon and a dash. Too far, Code Veronica. Too far. Set 3 months after the Raccoon City incident that takes place in Resident Evil 2 and 3, Code Veronica sees Claire Redfield continuing her search for her brother, Chris. Unfortunately, whilst poking around in an umbrella facility in Paris, she's captured and taken to an island in the Southern Ocean. Meanwhile, Chris receives a message from floppy-haired heartthrob Leon S. Kennedy telling him that Claire has been imprisoned and he too heads to the island. Code Veronica is very similar in terms of gameplay to its predecessors, so players should expect lots of zombies to battle and puzzles to solve. At the time of its release, Code Veronica was lauded for its atmosphere and audio-visual presentation, as well as its story, cinematics, and dynamic camera. Some were less than thrilled with the controls, which are on the janky side, but aside from that, there were few faults to be found. These days, however, the game is showing some signs of age, so come on Capcom, you've done 2, 3, and 4, now get on with a Code Veronica remake! I don't think it's too much to ask, although if you could do 5 and 6, because 6 is the best one. Number 92. Grim Fandango, 1998. PC, 94%. Death, it's coming for us all. But don't worry, because if 1998's Grim Fandango is to be believed, then the afterlife isn't all that bad. Developed and published by LucasArts and written and directed by the legendary Tim Schafer, who is also responsible for fantastic titles such as Psychonauts and Brutal Legend, Grim Fandango takes place in the Land of the Dead and focuses its attention on Manny, a travel agent who helps a lady named Mercedes to reach the Land of Eternal Rest. Oh, sounds ideal. 1 ticket, please! Throughout the game, players must assist Manny in collecting items, which can then be used to solve puzzles by either combining them with one another or NPCs and parts of the environment. Although critics were pleased with all aspects of Grim Fandango, it was the visual design that earned the game the most praise. Those who played it couldn't help but fall in love with the film noir-style graphics that made them feel like they'd fallen right into an old Hollywood movie. The varied cast of wacky characters were also a high point, as were the stories, puzzles, and overall atmosphere. One critic called the game a smart, beautiful, and enjoyable adventure that will leave you holding your breath waiting for Grim Fandango 2. We can't recommend that though. It's been 25 years and a sequel still hasn't materialized. Still holding out hope though, but not our breaths. Number 91. Metal Gear Solid, 1998. PlayStation, 94%. Wow, we've managed to get 4 whole entries without mentioning the work of video game auteur Hideo Kojima. It's probably some sort of record. I imagine Guinness already have our certificate in the post. Directed, written, and produced by the best friend of Jeff Keighley, Hideo Kojima, Metal Gear Solid tells the story of Solid Snake, a legendary infiltrator and saboteur, as he attempts to break into a nuclear weapons facility to prevent terrorist group Foxhound from launching the nukes. As you've probably gathered by now, stealth is the order of the day in the world of Metal Gear Solid, and so players must guide Snake through various areas of the facility, carefully avoiding enemies as far as possible. Thankfully, Snake has a variety of tricks at his disposal, and he's able to use sound to distract guards and can hide in boxes, because nothing is as inconspicuous as a random cardboard box that's appeared out of nowhere. What's that? Who's in there? Couldn't possibly tell. It's just a box. When it comes to the game's critical reception, it's probably quicker to list the things reviewers didn't like about the game, so here we go. Well, that was easy. Jokes aside, critics were mightily impressed with Metal Gear Solid, praising everything from its graphics and sound to its gameplay and stealth mechanics. Okay, I know I lied last time about there being no more Kojima for a bit, but this time I mean it. You can trust me, I promise. Number 90. Metal Gear Solid. Just joking. I got you though, didn't I? Peter?
Number 90. Jet Set Radio, 2000. Dreamcast, 94%. Lace up those skates and get your spray paint at the ready, because we're about to get totally radical, dude. Originally released for the Dreamcast in 2000, Jet Set Radio, or Jet Grime Radio if you want to get North American about this, sees players taking control of members of a gang of skaters. When the evil conglomerate, the Rakaku Group, get their hands on a mysterious vinyl record with the power to summon a demon, it's up to the youths to stick it to the man the only way they know how. Graffiti. Played from a third-person perspective, Jet Set Radio tasks players with guiding the gang members around the city of Tokyoto on inline skates and tagging the streets, and occasionally the gang's enemies, with spray paint. In addition to all of this vandalism, the skaters can perform a variety of tricks, which both add to the player's overall score and help them to access hard-to-reach areas. Jet Set Radio enjoyed a very warm response from critics who agreed that the gameplay was over the top and tons of fun, the soundtrack was one of the best in video gaming at the time, and the visual style made them feel like they'd been sucked into a comic book. The game went on to win a boatload of awards and spawned a sequel, Jet Set Radio Future, which was released in 2002 exclusively for the Xbox. Number 89, Super Mario Advance 4 Super Mario Bros. 3, 2003, Game Boy Advance, 94%. The original version of Super Mario Bros. 3 released for the NES in 1993 and was beloved by pretty much everyone who played it. The game garnered an average review score of 98 out of 100, but sadly, because it was only reviewed 6 times, it doesn't make our list. A game that does, however, is the 2003 remake Super Mario Advance 4 Super Mario Bros. 3 for the Game Boy Advance. Silver linings, eh? The plot of Super Mario Advance 4 is the same as in the original. Bowser's 7 children, the Koopalings, conquer each of the 7 kingdoms in Mushroom World by stealing each kingdom's magical wand and turning the monarchs into animals. At Princess Toadstool's request, Mario and Luigi set out on a mission to retrieve all of the wands and revert the kings back to their previous forms. Like Super Mario Bros. 3, Super Mario Advance 4 is a platformer, but it also comes with a whole host of extra features, including the addition of Charles Martinet's voice, the ability to scan e-cards, and a multiplayer mode. Though its average review score wasn't quite as high as the original, the remake still wowed critics and garnered praise for everything from its visuals and stage design to its new levels and utilization of the e-reader. In short, the remake is an all-round super title. Number 88, Street Fighter 4, 2009, PS3, 94%. Do you like punching people in the street but are sick of sore fists and getting arrested all the time? Then by golly, are you going to get a kick, pun very much intended, out of this next entry. After Capcom released Street Fighter 3 in 1997, there was a whopping 11 years before players got another mainline entry in the series. But I think fans would agree that Street Fighter 4 was worth the wait. Launched first in arcades in 2008 before making its way to home consoles the following year, Street Fighter 4 sees Earth's best warriors once again competing in a fighting tournament to prove to the world which of them is the greatest of all time. Naturally, however, the tournament isn't just there to prove who can punch and kick better than anyone else, and the not at all suspiciously named Sin Corporation plan to use it to lure out Ryu. Along with all of these Street Fighter gameplay staples, 4 introduced focus attacks, which allow the player to absorb their opponent's blow and then launch a counterattack. By expertly blending the old with the new, Street Fighter 4 earned itself a lot of fans, and it was awarded perfect scores by no less than 15 different publications. Not bad for a little old game where all you do is beat people up. Number 87, Halo 3, 2007, Xbox 360, 94%. Buckle up, boys, girls, and others, because we're jetting off to the 26th century now to take a look at Halo 3, a game that, as you can no doubt tell from its name, is the 3rd installment of the Halo series. Come on guys, it's really not that hard to figure out, pay attention. Like its predecessors, Halo 3 focuses on the exploits of Master Chief and chums as they continue their fight against the Covenant and the Flood. In this installment, Chief and co set out on a mission to stop the Covenant leader, the High Prophet of Truth, before he's able to activate all of the Halo rings and destroy all sentient life in the galaxy. No pressure then. Players step into the heavily armoured shoes of Master Chief himself and embark on a variety of quests, all whilst fending off Covenant and Flood adversaries. In addition to the quality FPS gameplay the series had become known for, Halo 3 added a new class of gear, an expanded vehicular component, and a map editing tool. Although there was some divide in critics' opinions when it came to the single-player mode in Halo 3, overall they were united in their love for the game. The multiplayer in particular earned heaps of praise, and most agreed that the game had set the bar for console shooters incredibly high. Number 86, Jack Jean, 2021, Switch, 94%. Although Jack Jean, which we think we're saying right, was originally released in Japan in 2021, it didn't end up getting a Western release until 2023, and as such, we missed it off of our best video games of 2021 list. Consider this our formal apology, Jack Jean. We feel mightily silly. In this visual novel, players take on the role of Kisa, a teenage girl with a love for acting. Sadly, the prestigious drama school her brother went to will only admit boys, so Kisa must disguise herself as one in order to be accepted. Not only does she have to worry about maintaining her ruse, but she must also land a starring role in the school's end-of-year play, or risk losing her place at the academy. Jack Jean is part visual novel, part dating sim, and part rhythm action game. So players are tasked with choosing what classes Kisa takes, who she interacts with, and making sure she successfully passes her singing and dancing classes by taking part in mini-games. The game's story and the artwork of the visual novel segments were commended by critics, and there was also a great deal of love for the rhythm game sections, which helped to keep things nice and interesting. Critics were also impressed with the sensitive treatment of Kisa, and praised the devs for their approach to and acceptance of people who have a non-conforming gender presentation, which is a breath of fresh air when compared to other pieces of media, which often play cross-dressing for laughs. Number 85, Quake, 1996, PC, 94%. From drama to llama now, as we turn our attention to Quake, a first-person shooter title that I'll pack a punch. Yeah, we know that Quake has nothing to do with llamas whatsoever, but you try and find another word that rhymes with drama. These segues don't write themselves. Heavily inspired by gothic fiction and the works of H.P. Lovecraft, Quake plops the unnamed protagonist into a series of dark, maze-like levels, and it's up to the player to get them out relatively unscathed. This isn't Hampton Court Palace, though, and there are things in the mazes that will be very interested to know what human innards look like. Armed with an array of weaponry, players simply need to blast their way through an array of monsties and find their way to the next level. After the success of Doom and Doom 2, id Software had some big shoes to fill with Quake, but oh boy did they knock it out of the park. Critics were hugely impressed by the 3D graphics, which for the time looked quite realistic, the atmospheric music provided by Mr. 9 Inch Nails himself, Trent Reznor, and the multiplayer mode. Not content with simply being a critical success though, the game was also a commercial one, and in 1997, id Software estimated that there may have been as many as 5 million copies of Quake in circulation. And in case you're wondering, 5 million copies of Quake would weigh about the same as 3,125 llamas. You're welcome. Number 84, The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt Complete Edition, 2022, PS5, 94%. Though The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt was originally released in 2015, it was the game's current-gen re-release that garnered the highest review scores, accruing a whopping average of 94 out of 100 on both PS5 and Xbox Series. The Witcher 3 centers on Geralt of Rivia, the titular Witcher, as he tries to track down his adopted daughter, Ciri, who's on the run from the also titular Wild Hunt. On his journey, he encounters fearsome monsties, dastardly humans, and lots of ladies. The massive open world is jam-packed with things to do, so players can get straight into the meat of the main quest right off the bat, or busy themselves with side quests, contracts, or a round or two of Gwent, a card game that everyone's up for playing, no matter the situation. I'm sorry to hear your wife's missing and presumed dead, but can I offer you a nice round of Gwent in this trying time? The Complete Edition not only comes with the base game, but also the Blood and Wine and Hearts of Stone expansions, which add around 50 hours of extra content to the already lengthy experience. In addition to all of the things that critics liked about the original version of the game, such as the story, characters, and stunning open world, the Complete Edition was applauded for its updated graphics, the inclusion of all the DLC, and the fact that if you already owned the original, it didn't cost you a penny. Number 83, Sid Meier's Civilization 2, 1996, PC, 94%. We told you that Civ 4 isn't the greatest Civ that ever cived, because that particular accolade goes to Sid Meier's Civilization 2, which released for PC in 1996 and for PlayStation in 1999. The aim of Civ 2, like Civ 4, is to choose a civilization, either from the 21 historical ones or your own custom-named civilization, and fulfill one of the win conditions, of which there are 3. Players can achieve victory either by winning the space race and reaching Alpha Centauri the fastest, surviving until the far-off future year of 2020, or simply by conquering everyone else. Originally, the game was a single-player-only title. However, multiplayer was added when Civ 2 was re-released in 1998, so once players had 2 years of experience under their belts, they could get their friends to join in the fun and give them a sound thrashing. As you can probably gather due to its inclusion on this list, Civ 2 was a massive hit with critics. Players welcomed the improvements that had been made to the gameplay since the original, including more in-depth combat, diplomatic relations, and trade, and a number of reviewers applauded the title's overall complexity, which was bound to satisfy hardcore strategy enthusiasts. It may well be nicknamed Civ, but you won't find any holes in this game. Jesus Christ, who writes this stuff? Number 82, The Elder Scrolls 4: Oblivion, 2006, Xbox 360, 94%. The first Bethesda entry on this list comes to us from the Elder Scrolls franchise, a series of sword and sorcery titles that take place on the continent of Tamriel, and specifically for the Elder Scrolls 4th numbered installment, in the land of Cyrodiil. Things aren't going all that well for the good people of Cyrodiil, however, as a nefarious cult, Mythic Dawn, plans to open portal gates to the demonic realm of Oblivion. Not sure why they'd want to do that. I mean, it sounds like a bad time all round for everyone, but who am I to judge? The game allows players to explore its massive open world at their leisure, so it's up to them whether they crack straight on with sorting out the province's cult problem, or spend their time roaming the landscape, interacting with NPCs, and embarking on side quests. Oblivion garnered universal critical acclaim on all platforms, but it was on Xbox 360 it performed the best. The game's impressive-looking graphics, rich open world, and schedule-driven NPCs were all lauded by critics, as were its RPG mechanics that managed to balance traditional elements with new ones that made the title nice and friendly to newcomers. Sadly, the game did catch a little bit of flack for its numerous bugs, but with that said, we think levitating NPCs actually add something to the experience. Number 81, Gears of War, 2006, Xbox 360, 94%. We've got more shooter fun for you now as we turn our attention to Gears of War, the third-person shooter experience that kick-started one of Microsoft's most beloved exclusive franchises. In fairness, there aren't that many of those, but my point still stands. Gears of War takes place following a global catastrophe on the planet Serra, during which a race known as the Locusts launch an all-out assault on humanity from beneath the surface of the planet. 14 years after the Locust's emergence, the game's protagonist, Marcus Phoenix, and his comrades in Delta Squad begin a last-ditch attempt to end the war against the Locust and save humanity. Unlike many other titles of the third-person shooter ilk, certainly at the time anyway, Gears of War places emphasis on cover-based tactics, and as such, anyone like me who goes into all video game conflicts with the same guns blazing approach, that's Halo players for you, is probably going to have a bad time. I did enjoy the game though, don't worry. Despite the general consensus that Gears of War didn't really bring much new to the table, either in terms of its gameplay or its narrative, critics agreed that everything it did do, it was bloody brilliant at. The visuals were polished, the controls were tight, and the overall experience was both engaging and exciting, proving that you can still be a fantastic video game, even if you're not much for innovation.
Number 80, Madden NFL 2004, 2003, PS2, 94%. Oh yeah, it's a sports. Let's go. We come now to the first of 3 Madden NFL titles on this list, and of the trio, this one's the most recent. As one might expect from a title bearing the name of a legendary American football coach and commentator, Madden NFL 2004 gives gamers the opportunity to engage in a spot of hand egg without the risk of multiple concussions. In addition to pitch-level antics, Madden NFL 2004 players were treated to a brand new owner mode, which replicates the experience of, you guessed it, owning a team, and affords the opportunity to manage everything from hiring and firing all the way down to setting the prices of hot dogs in the stadium. The versions of the game for the Game Boy Advance and PlayStation were pretty average, but on PS2, Xbox, GameCube, and PC, the title was a triumph. Critics lauded the action-packed gridiron gameplay and welcomed the addition of the owner mode as it brought additional complexity to the title. Within just 3 weeks of its initial release, Madden NFL 2004 sold over 2 million copies and went on to win a bunch of awards, including the Spike TV Video Game Awards Game of the Year accolade. I guess the folks over at Spike TV really like sports and they don't care who knows. Number 79, Celeste, 2018. Xbox One, 94%. Mountain climbing. It's hard work, potentially life-threatening, and the only real reward is a sweet view from the top and bragging rights. Mountain climbing in video games, however, is much easier. You can munch on snacks while you're doing it, and you might even get a shiny achievement at the end. In short, video game mountaineering is much better than real-life mountaineering. With that in mind, allow me to direct your attention to Celeste, the 2018 indie platformer developed and published by Maddie Makes Games. Players take control of Madeline, a young trans woman dealing with anxiety and depression, as she attempts to climb the titular Mount Celeste. Along the way, she meets a variety of colourful characters, including Badalin, the antagonist of the story and the personification of Madeline's self-doubt. In order to traverse the peak, Madeline must run, jump, climb, leap from walls, dash through mid-air, and pick up special objects that grant additional abilities. Upon its release, critics were blown away by Celeste, commending its expert blend of tight, addictive gameplay and a heartfelt narrative that resonates with many players. There was also a great deal of praise for the visual design, the soundtrack, and the inclusion of an assist mode, which made the game accessible to a wider audience. So next time you're thinking of trucking up Ben Nevis, just download Celeste instead. Number 78, Chrono Cross, 1999, PlayStation, 94%. PlayStation exclusive Chrono Cross was originally released in Japan in November 1999, but didn't make its way to North America until August 2000. But I'm sure North American fans of the game would agree that it was worth the wait. The story centers on Serge, a teenage boy who discovers that, in an alternate reality, he died as a child. Assisted by a variety of intriguing characters, Serge embarks on a journey to discover the truth behind the divergence of the timelines and uncover his past, all whilst pursued by Lynx, a shadowy foe searching to apprehend him at every turn. Chrono Cross is of the RPG persuasion, so players can expect plenty of exploration and combat, which grants XP and allows them to level their character. The game also features the element system, which is somewhat like Final Fantasy VII's materia system, with each element granting magical effects to the party. Its beautiful visual detail, rousing soundtrack, and deep, rich and engaging gameplay earned the game high review scores across the board, and of the 16 outlets that reviewed it, only one gave it less than 9 out of 10, the grumpy sod. You can be angry at a lot of things, but you certainly can't be cross at the quality of this video game. Oof, that one was rough. Number 77, The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time 3D, 2011, 3DS, 94%. Before you crack out the torches and pitchforks because of the position of this entry, I'd like to point out that this is a 2011 3D remaster of Ocarina of Time, not the original. We will get to that one, though not for quite some time. Ocarina of Time 3D is much like the 1998 N64 title in a number of ways. The story follows Link as he navigates various dungeons in order to awaken sages that can put a stop to Big Bad Ganondorf, learning new songs on his ocarina as he goes. The gameplay is also very very similar, focusing on exploration and combat with a teensy bit of stealth peppered in for good measure. The remaster wasn't just Ocarina of Time with better graphics, however, and not only incorporated the touchscreen for such things as inventory management and Ocarina playing, but also made quality of life improvements, like making the water temple a little less confusing. Expectations for the remaster were high considering the source material, but developer Grezzo knocked it out of the park. Critics enjoyed everything they did about the original and also lauded the new graphics, updated controls, and gameplay additions such as the new boss challenge mode. And they loved the mirrored versions of the rearranged dungeons from the Master Quest version of the game. Anyway, while we're on the subject of remasters, number 76, Metroid Prime Remastered, 2023, Switch, 94%. We've got another one for you now. The original Metroid Prime, released in 2002, is considered to be one of the greatest video games of all time. And before you ask, yes, you will be seeing it later on this list. So when it came to a remaster, there was some hefty boots to fill. Thankfully, developer Retro Studios, who happened to be the studio that created the original, knew they had to deliver, and deliver they did. Metroid Prime Remastered strikes a balance between preserving what players loved by the original and updating the things that needed to be modernised. As such, the story and gameplay have been left well alone, but the graphics and controls received a much-needed overhaul. The devs also added in unlockable art, because gamers these days won't stand for a game that doesn't have a smorgasbord of additional content. The remaster garnered universal critical acclaim, and reviewers agreed the title was a perfect example of how to honour a celebrated game's legacy whilst updating it for a modern audience. In fact, it was so well received that the only thing critics could find to complain about was the fact that the developers of the previous versions of the game weren't credited by name. Sure, it's pretty cruddy on the studio, but it's a fairly minor complaint in the grand scheme of things. Still, credit your devs, kids. Number 75, Madden NFL 2002, 2001, PS2, 94%. More American football for you now, only this time we're looking at Madden NFL 2002, which is completely different to Madden NFL 2004. Okay, fine, they're very similar games, but they're not identical, and that is what matters. Naturally, the 2001 title allows players to get in on a bit of pain-free football in a number of different modes, including Play Now, which is basically just quick play, season and tournament modes. Furthermore, players could also create their own player, and even their own team if they wanted to. Critics had a lot of positive things to say about Madden NFL 2002, with several saying that they felt it was an improvement over the previous year's offering in practically every way. The graphics were much more appealing to the eye, the AI had been tweaked to react better to the player's offensive tendencies, and the ball physics were much more realistic. Numerous outlets also paid compliments to the multiplayer, the level of customization available to the player, replay value, and the game's overall realism. One critic even went as far to say that even players who weren't massive American football fans would have a great time with Madden NFL 2002. And whilst we're not 100% sure that this is true, what we do know is that there are few better video games out there for those who do like tossing the old pigskin. That is, I'm told, not a dirty euphemism, but actually an American football term. Number 74, Devil May Cry, 2001, PS2, 94%. If it weren't for Shinji Mikami, the world might never have gotten Devil May Cry. The concept for the game started out as the earliest incarnation of Resident Evil 4. However, Mikami felt the overall concept was far too cool for the slightly goofy world of Resident Evil, and thus Devil May Cry was born. Though based on the Divine Comedy, an epic poem written in the 14th century by Dante Alighieri, Devil May Cry is set in modern times. The story follows demon hunter Dante as he embarks on a quest to slay the demon lord Mundus, who is responsible for the deaths of his mother and brother. Platforming and hack-and-slash combat are the order of the day in Devil May Cry, with players being rewarded for how stylish their fights are. Additionally, side quests can be undertaken in order to earn power-ups, and the gameplay is bolstered by exploration and puzzle elements. While some reviewers weren't all that keen on how difficult Devil May Cry was, the response to the game in general was overwhelmingly positive. The fun, fast-paced combat, exciting visual design, and gothic ambience of the title all helped to earn it very high review scores. But above all else, it was just a really, really cool game. Much cooler than that loser Leon S. Kennedy, eh? Just kidding, Leon. We love you, really. Number 73, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 4, 2002, PS2, 94%. Caw! What's that I hear? The sound of a visit from the Birdman? What a treat! The fourth entry into the Tony Hawk Pro Skater franchise takes a slightly different approach to its gameplay than its predecessors. Where the career mode in previous entries gave players a time limit in which they must complete each level's objectives, Pro Skater 4 allows them to freely explore at their leisure, with NPCs offering goals to complete. Much of the rest of the gameplay remains from previous titles, but new tricks, grind and lip extensions, and the ability to perform variant tricks are now available to players. 15 skaters are included, along with a handful of unlockable ones, including Star Wars' Jango Fett, Mike Vallely, and Iron Maiden's mascot, Eddie. Whilst Pro Skater 4 may not be the best pro skater of all time, it still got a remarkable reception from critics, who felt that, although its graphics hadn't advanced much since Pro Skater 3, the game's sizable maps more than made up for it. The increased difficulty was also lauded, as was the removal of the time limit from career mode, the online multiplayer, and the soundtrack. It's just a shame that after Pro Skater 4, we skate fans have gotten no more non-remake Pro Skater games. What's that? No, I'm not counting Pro Skater 5, it was a flaming pile of plops. Number 72, Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, 2009, Xbox 360, 94%. For its first 3 games, the Call of Duty series stayed firmly rooted in World War II. But then some big brain came along and said, what if we made a Call of Duty that wasn't set in the past? And so, now we have Modern Warfare. The second Modern Warfare game takes place in 2016, and follows Multinational Special Forces Unit Task Force 141 as they hunt down Russian ultranationalist Vladimir Makarov and 1st Ranger Battalion of the United States Army, who must defend Washington, D.C. from Russian invasion. Modern Warfare 2 is an out-and-out first-person shooter filled to the brim with action-packed gunfights and spectacular set pieces. 3 different game modes are available to players: Campaign, which is the game's story mode, Spec Ops, Modern Warfare 2's challenge mode, and Multiplayer, which does exactly what it says on the tin. Like its predecessor, Modern Warfare 2 was universally acclaimed, with reviewers lining up to laud its in-depth story, multiplayer and set pieces, along with its audio-visual presentation and the wealth of content available to players. There were some that lamented the campaign's short length, but hey, that just leaves you with more time to focus on the fantastic multiplayer. And let's face it, there's nothing more fun than rounding up your friends and shooting them with big guns. In video games, James, in video games, please put the gun down. Number 71, Final Fantasy IX, 2000, PlayStation, 94%. We're heading back to RPG land now to take a look at Final Fantasy IX, the 9th mainline entry in the Final Fantasy series developed by Square. Unlike Final Fantasies 6, 7, and 8, which all take place in futuristic settings, 9 returns to the franchise's roots and is set in the medieval-style world of Gaia. The story centers on thief Zidane, who kidnaps the princess Garnet Till Alexandros XVII and likes to go around headbutting people. Bit of 2006 World Cup humour for you there. The gameplay sees Zidane and his party exploring the world, interacting with NPCs and engaging in combat, which uses the active time battle system that was first introduced in Final Fantasy IV. Some areas of the map are blocked by rivers and mountain ranges, however these can be traversed with boats, airships or adorable chocobos. Final Fantasy IX was celebrated by critics for its addictive gameplay, intriguing story and its cast of vibrant, interesting characters, as well as the simplified ability system that made it more welcoming to new players than its predecessors. The reversion to a medieval setting was also praised, and though some found the soundtrack to be uninspired, at least when compared to previous Final Fantasy titles, on the whole, Final Fantasy IX was a welcome addition to the series, and one that scratched that nostalgic itch for older fans.
Number 70, Tetris Effect Connected, 2021, Switch, 94%. Tetris, created in the Soviet Union in 1985, is probably the most famous video game of all time, so there's little wonder that in the 4 decades since its original release, there have been more versions than James has had hot dinners. I'm serious, we're not going to waste money heating up his gruel. The best of these iterations is Tetris Effect Connected, which originally released in 2020, but got the best review score for the Switch version, which didn't hit Nintendo's console until 2021. At its core, Tetris Effect Connected is Tetris, but it comes with a plethora of bonuses that make it the very best way to play the game. This modern version of Tetris gives players a cooperative multiplayer mode, competitive mode, a zone mechanic that allows players to stop time and clear more than 4 lines at once, as well as all new music and a variety of different themes. Tetris Effect Connected scored well on all platforms, but it did the best on the Switch. Critics and players alike appreciated the fact that genuine care had been taken to both honour the original game and innovate in order to keep things nice and fresh. The new game modes were well received, as were the visuals and the soundtrack. Right, if you'll excuse me, I've got the sudden urge to go and rearrange my fridge. Number 69. Nice! Tom Clancy's Splinter Cell Chaos Theory, 2005. Xbox, 94.02%. Taking the nicest spot on our list today is the third game in the Tom Clancy-endorsed Splinter Cell series, Chaos Theory. Like its predecessors, Chaos Theory focuses on the exploits of Sam Fisher, a covert ops agent working for the Third Echelon, a branch of the US National Security Agency. The story sees Sam trying to prevent all-out war after China and North Korea take exception to Japan's formation of an information self-defense force, which the two nations feel is both responsible for recent information warfare attacks and in contravention of Article 9 of the post-World War II Convention. The states involve themselves because, America. Missiles are fired, and it's left to Fisher to save the day. Being a stealth-flavored title, Chaos Theory tasks players with sneaking around and completing missions in a covert manner, and whilst there is combat, it's beneficial to take enemies out quietly rather than risking causing a scene. Critics appreciated the fact that Chaos Theory was less of a stickler for the rules than previous Splinter Cell titles, which meant that there was less pressure on players to complete missions how the game wanted them to. The balance of story and gameplay was admired, and the audiovisual presentation was also appreciated. China, North Korea, and Japan might not have been able to agree on anything, but at least there was no disagreement amongst Splinter Cell fans about the quality of this offering. Number 68. World of Goo, 2008. Wii, 94.04%. Ah, for God's sake, why couldn't this one have been in the number 69 spot? The jokes would have practically written themselves. Stupid average review score being 0.02% too bloody high. When it comes to premises for puzzle games, things don't get much simpler than World of Goo. The main aim is to get a certain number of goo balls into a pipe by building structures out of said goo balls that would allow them to traverse difficult terrain. The idea is incredibly simple, but in later levels the game becomes devilishly tricky, though the gameplay is so addictive that players will go back to it time and time again as they try to succeed. Despite the relative lack of fanfare surrounding its release, the critical response to World of Goo was very positive. Those who played it were mightily impressed by its easy-to-understand but difficult-to-master gameplay, and several reviewers felt that it was one of the best original games for the Wii. The camera controls and lack of level editor were lamented by critics, but those were really the only flaws that anyone could find with the game, and it went on to win a smorgasbord of gaming accolades, including Best Independent Game at the Spike TV Video Game Awards and GameSpot's Best Game No One Played Award. Oh, the second one makes us feel a bit sad. It's available on Switch, so go show it some love, just not the kind that would normally result in goo. Number 67. God of War, 2018. PS4, 94.1%. Another God of War in this economy? Preposterous. Indeed, the third God of War title to make it onto this list is the 2018 reboot simply titled God of War. Clearly, having run out of Greek gods to slaughter, this time we find Kratos hanging out with various Norse deities as well as his son Atreus. After the death of his wife, Kratos and Atreus embark on a journey to scatter her ashes from the highest peak in the 9 realms. They make a number of friends along the way, but they also piss off a lot of Norse gods too, particularly Baldur, the game's main antagonist. Whoops. The third-person action-adventure title sees Kratos and Atreus exploring several of the 9 realms, solving puzzles and fighting enemies using the series' classic hack-and-slash combat, which has received quite the overhaul. Various skills can be attained and upgraded using the game's leveling system, and equipment can be looted and then improved by visiting the dwarven smiths Sindri and Brock. Until a certain Rootin' Tootin' sequel came out in October 2018, God of War was the highest-rated game of that year, and for good reason. Its graphics, art direction, story, sound design, voice acting, acting in general, gameplay and combat mechanics, and use of Norse mythology were all celebrated by critics, and it garnered perfect scores from dozens of different publications, and boy, are they well deserved. There we are, there's our one boy. Number 66. Undertale, 2015. PC, 94.11%. We're shifting our focus from epic, big-budget games for a moment in order to take a look at Undertale, the indie title released in 2015 and developed by Toby Fox. In Undertale, players assume the role of a small child who has fallen into the underground. No, not that one. A subterranean part of the Earth which is separated from the rest of the world by a magical barrier and is home to all manner of monsties. Whilst trying to make their way back to the surface, the child will meet a variety of creatures, some friendly, some not so, and it's up to players whether they take the path of peace or choose violence. To progress through the game, players will need to explore their surroundings, solve puzzles, and navigate NPC encounters. If they do end up in a fight, they'll find themselves in a bullet hell situation, controlling a little heart and trying to avoid incoming projectiles. Despite being an indie title that was mostly developed by just one person, Undertale quickly amassed a massive following, and by the end of 2015, it was one of the best-selling games on Steam. It wasn't just players that were impressed with the title. Critics fell over themselves to laud it as well, extolling its hilarious yet heartfelt story, highly nuanced combat, and simplistic visuals. Undertale? More like flippin' Wondertale got them. Number 65. Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare. 2007. Xbox 360, 94.16%. We heard you like Call of Duty, so we got you another one. Don't say we never spoil you. Outscoring its sequel by just 0.16%, Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare is the first COD title that doesn't take place during World War II and instead is set against a backdrop of civil war in Russia and unrest in the Middle East. The game takes place in a number of different locales, including Russia, the Middle East, Ukraine, and the UK, and shows the conflicts from the perspective of a US Marine and a British SAS commando. Players can choose to go it alone and make their way through the campaign, or they can take part in multiplayer games, which take the form of team-based or deathmatch modes across a variety of maps. While the first 3 COD titles went down well with reviewers, Call of Duty 4 was the first to achieve universal acclaim. Critics were mightily impressed with the game and showered both its single-player and multiplayer campaigns with compliments. There were some who felt that its flashy set pieces and shiny graphics were simply hiding the fact that the title wasn't particularly innovative, but even if that's the case, which it isn't, there's no that's a bias on my part, there's no denying that everything it did almost flawlessly. You know what they say? If it ain't broke, don't fix it. We are leaving! I love that line. That was for me. Number 64. Persona 4 Golden, 2012. Vita, 94.16%. Gold makes everything better, doesn't it? A gourmet burger looks just a little fancier if there's a bit of gold leaf on the bun. That golden Wii that was gifted to the Queen, apparently, is way cooler than the standard version of the console, and Persona 4 Golden is far superior to Persona 4. In Persona 4 Golden, players step into the shoes of a high school student who has moved to the countryside from the big city. However, things quickly go south, and he winds up embroiled in a murder investigation with a group of friends who discover that they are able to summon powerful manifestations of their psyches, the titular personas. Persona 4 was originally released in 2008, whereas Golden didn't reach consoles until 4 years later. This enhanced version of the game is considered to be the best way to play it, offering fans a new character, additional personas, extra voice lines, and more anime cutscenes. Everything that critics liked about the original, they also appreciated in Golden, but most agreed that the latter was the better experience. Not only was the story well written and the gameplay addictive, but the additional content was considered to be the cherry on top of an already excellent title. Thankfully, the game is no longer confined to the Vita and can finally be played on home consoles. Thanks, Atlas. We very much appreciate it. Number 63. Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, 2003. Xbox, 94.21%. Grab those blasters because we're off to a galaxy far, far away. Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, or KOTOR if you want to get time-saving about this, sees players take on the role of a Force user who must ally with a variety of different characters from all across the galaxy in order to put a stop to the evil Darth Malak. As the player character levels up, new abilities are unlocked, and once they've gained enough experience, they'll be able to use Force powers. Combat is round-based and utilizes Dungeons & Dragons rules, so each character has a set number of actions and success is determined using a D20 system. Within just 4 days on shelves, KOTOR was sold out, and within the first 2 weeks of its release, 270,000 copies had made their way into the homes of excited Star Wars fans. There's little wonder it was so commercially successful, as those who reviewed it had nothing but good things to say about the game. Critics praised the massive, explorable environments, the unusual combat system, and the interesting characters that populated the galaxy. KOTOR went on to win a buttload of awards, that's the correct term by the way, including including the BAFTA for Best Xbox Game of 2003 and the Game of the Year accolade at the Game Developers' Choice Awards. In short, if you're wanting to play a great Star Wars-themed RPG, then KOTOR is the droid you're looking for. Number 62. Resident Evil 2, 2019. Xbox One, 94.44%. Board up those doors and windows and ready those shotguns, because yet again, it's about to get evil in this residence. 2019's Resident Evil 2 is a remake of the 1998 survival horror title of the same name and sees rookie cop Leon S. Kennedy and student Claire Redfield trying to make their way out of Raccoon City after an outbreak of the T-virus, which has, wouldn't you know it, turned most of the city's inhabitants into flesh-eating mutants. Played from a third-person perspective, Resident Evil 2 tasks players with navigating a number of different locales, like the RCPD station, sewers, and Umbrella Labs, and solving a variety of puzzles in order to progress. Of course, Leon and Claire aren't alone, and whilst there are some friendly faces dotted around the city, they'll also face a variety of different monsters, including the terrifying, ever-stalking, hat-wearing Mr. X. Critics agreed that not only did Resident Evil 2 look fantastic, having had its graphics completely overhauled, but it also controlled well and was genuinely scary. Additionally, the unlockable second playthrough added an extra perspective to the story and gave the game further longevity. The general consensus was that Capcom had been able to both capture what made the original so thrilling and craft a gameplay experience that felt in line with the standards of 2019. We have to applaud them for not Leoning too heavily on nostalgia. She's fired. The rice is fired. Number 61. Super Mario World, 1990. SNES, 94.44%. We come now to the oldest title on today's list, Super Mario World, a game that was released before most of us here at Team TripleJump were even born. Is that giving you an existential crisis? It should! You're so old! The side-scrolling platformer for the SNES sees Mario, Luigi, and Princess Toadstool leaving the Mushroom Kingdom as they head to Dinosaur Land for a well-deserved holiday. There's no rest for the wicked, though, as once they get there, Toadstool is, once again, kidnapped by Bowser, and it's left to the Mario brothers to rescue her. Seriously, the woman should invest some of her royal wealth in a couple of armed bodyguards, because this is getting ridiculous. Like its predecessors, Super Mario World is a 2D side-scrolling platformer, and it's up to players to navigate each level as either Mario or Luigi, collecting power-ups and facing enemies as they go. The game also marked the very first appearance of Yoshi, the series' adorable dinosaur character who Mario can ride and who is able to eat many enemies. It's like Jurassic Park, only really, really cute. In the years since its release, over 20 million copies of Super Mario World have been sold, making it the most commercially successful SNES game of all time. And there's no wonder. It was bright and colourful, it sounded wonderful, and the gameplay was incredibly addictive, with many players finding themselves going back to it time and time again.
Number 60. Wipeout XL, 1996. PlayStation, 94.75%. If you like racing games but are sick of the same old boring vehicles, then maybe you'd get a kick out of Wipeout XL, the 1996 sequel to Wipeout, a game whose title stylization looks like it was done by the mocking SpongeBob meme. Wipeout XL puts players into the cockpit of a futuristic anti-gravity vehicle and tasks them with racing, either against other players or computer-controlled opponents. Unlike many other driving titles for the time, Wipeout XL gives players the opportunity to improve their chances of winning by equipping each vehicle with weapons that can be used to destroy the competition. It's not very sportsmanlike, but it is a great deal of fun. Whilst the original Wipeout was well received by critics, Wipeout XL blew them away. More or less everything about the game was celebrated by reviewers, including the level of innovation on display, the controls, which had been refined somewhat since the previous entry in the series, and the new mechanic that allowed players to destroy their opponents. The elaborate tracks were also applauded, and several critics remarked on the brilliance of the soundtrack, audio, AI, weapons, and graphics. Wipeout XL was a masterclass in creating an exciting, inventive racing game, and it stood out from the crowd for all the right reasons. Right, if anyone needs me, I'll be taking a leaf out of this game's book and hitting Ashton's car with a baseball bat so she can't beat me out of the car park this evening. Haha, see you at the finish line, Matthews. Number 59. The Walking Dead Episode 5, No Time Left, 2012, PC, 94.75%. Did you bring any tissues with you? You're probably going to need them for the next entry. I'd offer you one of mine, but I don't want to. Cost of living crisis, innit? Though it can now be purchased as a collection, originally Telltale's The Walking Dead was released as a series of 5 episodes. But whilst they were all brilliant, it was the final chapter, No Time Left, that garnered the best reception from critics. The overall story follows Clementine and Lee, a young girl and her father figure, as they attempt to navigate the perils of a world ravaged by the zombie apocalypse. By episode 5, Clem has gone missing, and it's up to Lee and the other survivors to try to locate her before it's too late. Sadly, things don't go completely to plan, and Clem is faced with a heartbreaking choice. All of the standard good game signifiers were present in No Time Left. It looked nice, sounded good, and lacked significant glitches, but it was the story that won the hearts of critics and players alike. Over the course of the previous 4 episodes, Telltale had woven a rich narrative with deep, complex, and likeable characters, and No Time Left was a perfectly poignant ending to a brilliant story. It was kind of like getting to the bottom of an ice cream sundae and finding a bit of bubblegum, except the bubblegum made you cry a lot. Number 58, Ninja Gaiden Black, 2005, Xbox, 94.76%. People often debate whether pirates or ninjas are better, but I don't see any pirates anywhere on this list so far, so make of that what you will. Set in the same universe as the Dead or Alive series, Ninja Gaiden tells the story of Ryu Hayabusa, a 21st century ninja who embarks on a quest to recover a stolen sword and get revenge for the slaughter of his clan. The game was inspired by the Ninja Gaiden series from the 1980s, and according to director Tomonobu Itagaki, it's a prequel to the original NES titles. The black version of the game was released a year after Ninja Gaiden, and not only included the base game and both Hurricane packs, but also featured additional enemies, costumes, and difficulty settings. Ninja Gaiden was very well received by critics, but Ninja Gaiden Black fractionally outdid it in the average review score stakes. Those who played the game were impressed with the technical aspects, which many felt truly pushed what the Xbox was capable of, the stunning audio-visual presentation, and the challenging but exciting gameplay. Both versions of the game were absolutely worth playing, but the complete package that Ninja Gaiden Black offered was just too good to pass up, and if you owned an Xbox, it was one of the essential games to play. Number 57, Journey, 2015, PS4, 94.8%. No, this isn't that terrible 1983 arcade title where you help members of the rock band Journey to retrieve their instruments. That game was awful, and I feel like even mentioning it in the presence of such greatness is an abomination. No, we're talking about the Journey that was originally released in 2012 for the PS3 and was ported to the PS4 in 2015. In Journey, players take control of a robed figure and help them to traverse a vast desert in order to reach a distant mountain. Along the way, they'll be joined by other players who can assist them, but with whom they cannot communicate directly, save for a series of musical chimes. Both the PS3 and PS4 versions of the game received universal critical acclaim, but the PS4 version slightly outperformed the previous gen offering when it came to average review scores. The art direction enjoyed the vast majority of critics' admiration, but the game's soundtrack and animations were also commended. Additionally, Journey's ability to make its audience feel was widely praised, with one reviewer even going as far as to call the game a non-denominational religious experience. Alright, calm down. It might have been a small-town game with a somewhat lonely world, but it sure took that midnight train going straight to Fantastic Game Town. That's definitely a real place. Google it. I'll wait. Number 56, Championship Manager 4, 2003, PC, 95%. Oh yeah, here we go. This should have been in Ben's section, really. Couldn't we have just fudged the numbers and put it somewhere lower in the list? If you like football, but are far more interested in what goes on behind the scenes than what happens on the pitch, it's likely you're already a fan of the Championship Manager series. The aim of Championship Manager 4, like its predecessors, is simple. Choose a team from the huge number on offer and ensure their success by looking after finances, keeping the board and supporters happy, and arranging player transfers. The biggest change from previous Championship Managers in Championship Manager 4 is the addition of a 2D match engine, which allows players to view matches, or the important parts of them anyway, in real time in order to glean what's going well and what needs to change. Critics were incredibly pleased with Championship Manager 4, mostly because of how deep and realistic it was. Several critics noted the addictive nature of the title, warning players they could very easily lose several hours of their lives to Championship Manager 4 before they even realised it had happened. The huge roster of teams and players was also praised, as was the fact that even the potato-iest of PCs would be able to run the game. As far as football management games go, this one really is top of the league. Number 55, Metal Gear Solid 5: The Phantom Pain, 2015, Xbox One, 95%. Hey, look everyone, it's Hideo Kojima again. What have you got for us this time, Hideo? Oh, yeah, that's right. Hideo couldn't make it to the studio. Maybe next time. What? Yes, James, I know he missed your birthday as well. Please stop crying. The most recent Metal Gear Solid title, The Phantom Pain, takes place in 1984, 9 years after the events of its prologue, Ground Zeroes, and focuses its attention on punished Venom Snake as he makes his way into a Soviet-occupied Afghanistan and attempts to exact revenge on those who slaughtered his men and came close to killing him at the end of the previous game. Another title in which players must do a sneak, MGS5 gives players an open world to explore, which they must do whilst remaining undetected. The map can be traversed in a variety of ways, and Venom is equipped with a number of weapons and gadgets that allow him to take out his enemies via both lethal and non-lethal methods. Though the game's story divided critics, on the whole, MGS5 was very well received. The gameplay mechanics were considered a triumph, as were the controls, visuals, and open world design. The game was practically perfect, and saw the Metal Gear Solid series go out on a high. Now, if only Konami would stop putting out titles like Metal Gear Survive, the franchise would be able to die happy. Number 54, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2, 2001, Game Boy Advance, 95%. It's time for another visit from the Birdman now, and the great news is this entry is portable. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2 for the Game Boy Advance is quite different to its home console counterparts, taking place in an isometric perspective rather than third person. All of the levels are present here, but the handheld edition lacks the level editor, the skater customization, and the multiplayer mode, owing to the GBA's lack of processing power. The control scheme is also simplified somewhat, and instead of the banging punk rock tunes, GBA players got their own instrumental soundtrack. Despite these limitations of the console though, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2 for the Game Boy Advance was incredibly well received. Admittedly, not quite as well received as the home console title, it is after all a pared back version of that game, but it was still a triumph. Critics appreciated the quick load times, smooth gameplay, and first-rate graphics, and most agreed that the experience on the GBA was just as fun as on home consoles. One critic even went as far as to say that if every handheld game was like Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2, quote, there would be no war, crime, or violence because everybody would be too busy playing Game Boy. Now, I'm no expert in global politics or anything like that, but what I can say is that critic was 100% correct. If you just bear with me a minute here. Hello, is that the UN? I've got a great idea for world peace, but I'm gonna need 8 billion Game Boys. Number 53, Madden NFL 2003, 2002, PS2, 95%. Oh, yippee! Another hand egg entry. I, a British person, am super thrilled by this. Go sports! Those of you who aren't into American football will be pleased to know this is the last Madden NFL title on this list. Unfortunately for you guys, though, it's not the last American football title full stop, so apologies for that. Close your eyes and think of England, or rugby, or something. On the whole, Madden NFL 2003 is much like the other Madden NFL titles we've already covered, but a few key changes were made for this edition. Updates included online play, an arcade-style training camp, and an incredibly versatile play creator that allows gamers to craft plays in more or less any shape they want. I cannot fathom the number of penis plays there must be out there. The game was a massive hit and earned itself perfect scores from a wide variety of publications. Those who reviewed it appreciated all of the new features and felt that enough changes had been made to the standard Madden NFL formula to justify purchasing the game. It was realistic, immersive, and engrossing, and EA were commended for creating a title that so perfectly captured the spirit of the sport. Sadly, this is probably the only time anyone has ever praised EA for anything they've done. Don't think we've forgotten about those cheeky loot boxes. Number 52, The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask, 2000, Nintendo 64, 95%. I'll be honest, I'm a little shocked to see a game like The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask this far down the list, but hey, that's just how the cookie hath crumbled, unfortunately. Set just after Ocarina of Time in the series' Child era, Majora's Mask follows protagonist Link as he arrives in the parallel world of Termina. Though he originally sets out simply to find his fairy pal Navi, he ends up becoming embroiled in a quest to save Termina when he finds out that the moon is set to crash into the world in just 3 days' time. That's less than ideal, isn't it? Majora's Mask introduced a number of new concepts to the series, including the 3-day time loop mechanic and the use of masks which allow Link to transform into a variety of different beings. At its core, however, Majora's Mask is a Legend of Zelda game through and through, and players can expect plenty of dungeon exploration, puzzles, and combat. The game was both a critical and a commercial success, and by the end of the N64's lifespan, over 3 million copies of Majora's Mask had been sold. Critics were lining up to bestow praise upon it, commending everything from its graphics and gameplay to its innovative time loop mechanics and dark tone. Some struggled with the 3-day time limit and felt it made it less accessible than previous Zelda titles, but those critics probably just needed to get good, as Dark Souls fans would say. Number 51, The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past and Four Swords, 2002, Game Boy Advance, 95%. Whew, another Zelda? What a treat. The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past was originally released in 1991 for the SNES, and is generally considered to be one of the greatest games ever made. Sadly, its average review score of 93 out of 100 meant that it just missed out on a spot on this list. But all is not lost, because its GBA port, released in 2002, comfortably made the cut. A Link to the Past sees the titular protagonist doing his darndest to save Hyrule from the Demon King Ganon and rescue the descendants of the Seven Sages. The 2002 port also came with a cheeky added bonus in the form of Four Swords, a multiplayer-only story in which Zelda is captured by a creature named Vati, and Link, along with 3 Link clones, is tasked with saving her. A Link to the Past and Four Swords was considered to be nothing short of a masterpiece by both critics and players. The puzzles in both segments received tons of praise, as did the overworld, the gameplay, and the audio-visual presentation of the whole package. With an average review score of 95 out of 100, A Link to the Past and Four Swords is the highest rated Game Boy Advance title of all time. And for that, we salute it. Don't we, Ashton?
Number 50, Persona 5 Royal, 2022, PC 95%. You know what's better than having loads of gold? Being royalty, of course! Though Persona 5 Royal was originally released for the PS4 in 2019, it was its 2022 PC release that garnered the highest average review score. An enhanced version of 2016's Persona 5, Persona 5 Royal focuses its attention on Joker, a high school student who is transferred to a new school in Tokyo after wrongly being accused of assault. Once there, he and several other students find that they have special powers, form a vigilante group, and begin stealing the malevolent intent from hearts of corrupted adults. The game is part dungeon crawling RPG and part social simulation, so not only will players have to prepare themselves for intense combat scenarios, they'll also have to navigate tricky social situations as well. Like Persona 4 Golden, Persona 5 Royal offers players additional perks such as an extra character, new music, and a playable third semester. Persona 5 was very well received by critics, but Royal absolutely blew them away. Reviewers applauded the fact that it resolved the issue of the original's slightly abrupt ending and praised the gameplay additions. Critics also commended the story, RPG gameplay, and art direction of the game, and agreed that Royal is the absolute best way to experience Persona 5. Gosh, I feel like I should bow or curtsy or something. Number 49, Halo 2, 2004, Xbox 95%. We're off to the 26th century again to take a look at Halo 2, the follow-up to 2001's Halo Combat Evolved. And fret not, we will get to that soon. In Halo 2, players once again step into the shoes of Master Chief, who embarks on a mission to kill the Prophet of Regret after another Halo installation is discovered. For those of you who missed the briefing, Halo, bad. Make all life go boom. Players can opt to take on the campaign alone or with a friend, and once they've made it to the end of the story, there's hours of fun to be had with Halo 2's multiplayer mode, which can be played either online or split screen. Though some critics were a little disappointed with the campaign, which was decried for being too short and ending on a cliffhanger, on the whole, Halo 2 went down very well. The graphics looked great for the time, the sound was excellent, and the online multiplayer was considered to be the absolute best available on the Xbox. Halo 2 went on to sell like hotcakes, and by the time the Xbox was discontinued, nearly 8.5 million copies of the game had found their way into gamers' homes. It also won a ton of awards, which included no less than 4 Interactive Achievement Awards, including Console Game of the Year. With that said though, that same year the IAA gave their Hall of Fame accolade to the guy who founded EA, so we're not sure we can trust their judgment. Number 48, Gran Turismo 3, A-Spec, 2001, PlayStation 2, 95%. The second best racing game on today's list is Gran Turismo 3 A-Spec, the third installment in the venerable Gran Turismo series. What's the best racing game of all time? Well, you'll have to stick around to find out, won't you? The aim of the game is to get behind the wheel of one of many little digital cars and win races. The more races you win, the more cars you unlock, with the available vehicles ranging from the humble Mini Cooper to the ultra-fancy Aston Martin Vanquish. A grand total of 19 different courses are available to players, who can opt to either take on the computer or gather some pals to race against real human beings. You know, assuming your friends are real human beings and not androids. Gran Turismo 3 A-Spec was both a critical and a commercial success, ultimately selling almost 15 million copies worldwide. Reviewers had nothing but praise for the title, lauding its graphics, sound design, controls, and realism. Not only did the game go down well with critics and players and make a silly amount of money, but it also received a number of awards, including Best Racing Game of 2001 at the Game Critics Awards and Best Console Racing accolade at the Interactive Achievement Awards. Definitely a title that bought its A game. Number 47, Red Dead Redemption 2010, PS3, 95%. Well, what in tarnation do we have here? Looks to me like some rootin' tootin' cowboy fun. Oddly, everyone seems to forget that Red Dead Redemption is not the first game in Rockstar's Grand Theft Horse series, but is instead the follow-up to 2004's Red Dead Revolver. That game was wholly average though, so there's little wonder that no one really remembers it, especially considering how good Redemption and its 2018 sequel are. Set in ye olde Wild West, Red Dead Redemption follows John Marston, a former outlaw who is forced to bring members of his own gang to justice after the government takes his wife and son hostage. Red Dead Redemption takes place in a vast open world, and as such, players are free to roam and explore at their leisure, take on side quests, or pursue the main story. The cinematic nature of Red Dead Redemption's presentation was celebrated by critics, several of whom compared its visuals, sound, and set pieces to those of Hollywood movies. Its wide variety of intriguing but flawed characters was also commended, as was the sprawling open world and the plethora of things to do. To date, the game has sold over 23 million copies, making it not only one of the greatest games ever, but one of the best-selling games of all time. Let's hope the devs treated themselves to a couple of bottles of moonshine to celebrate their efforts. Number 46, Little Big Planet, 2008, PlayStation 3, 95%. What do you get if you combine platforming, a small burlap protagonist, and national treasure Stephen Fry? Well, you get Little Big Planet, of course. Released exclusively for the PlayStation 3 in 2008, Little Big Planet stars Sackboy, who must help the various creators of the titular Little Big Planet and face the Collector, a nefarious being who's been kidnapping and stealing various creations. More exciting than the plot, however, is the fact that Little Big Planet allows players to create their own levels using the game's intuitive level designer, and prior to 2021 when the online servers were shut down, these levels could be published, which meant that other players could enjoy them too. Whilst the pre-made gameplay pleased critics, it was the creative aspects of Little Big Planet that earned it the vast majority of its praise. Reviewers felt the level creator itself was marvellous, because not only was it easy to understand, but it was also capable of creating complex and magnificent platforming stages. Truly, the only limit was the player's imagination, and as long as they could dream it, and had the patience and right level of ingenuity, they could bring it to life. As though all of that isn't enough to endear Little Big Planet to you, it's also narrated by Stephen Fry, and if you don't know who that is, then by golly do I feel sorry for you.
Isn't it about time you changed your shirts, Walrus Face?
Number 45, Grand Theft Auto Vice City, 2002, PlayStation 2, 95%. More from Rockstar now, only this one eschews the horses and saloons in favour of fast cars, bright lights and the big city. Grand Theft Auto Vice City, the fourth main entry into Rockstar's Grand Theft Auto series, focuses its attention on Tommy Vercetti, a mobster who's been recently released from prison as he attempts to build a criminal empire and get revenge against those responsible for his incarceration. Set in 1986, the game is heavily inspired by the city of Miami, Florida, as well as film and television shows of the 80s such as Scarface and Miami Vice. The game's open world can be explored either on foot or in a variety of vehicles, and alongside the main questline, players can take on side missions, commit various crimes, and even purchase a business to earn a little extra cash. While some players did experience one or two issues with Vice City's controls and found the odd bug or glitch here and there, overall the response to the game was incredibly positive. Critics applauded the design of the open world, the wide variety of missions, main and otherwise, and the sound design, as well as the game's charismatic protagonist and the voice performance of Ray Liotta. It's such a shame we never got any sort of remaster. I think such a thing would be really well done. Number 44, Baldur's Gate 2, Shadows of Arm, 2000, PC, 95%. Grab those dice bags and character sheets now, because we're off to the wonderful world of Dungeons & Dragons, courtesy of Baldur's Gate 2, Shadows of Arm. The BioWare-developed Turn of the Millennium RPG is the sequel to Baldur's Gate, a game that was also critically acclaimed and takes place in the Forgotten Realms, which fans of D&D will be quite familiar with. Based on the AD&D 2E rule set, I swear if anyone asks me to explain Thaco, I will hit them, the game continues the story of Gorian's ward, whose heritage has attracted the attention of nefarious mage John Irenicus. Critics lavished praise upon Baldur's Gate 2, lauding its polished audiovisual presentation, addictive gameplay, and combat that had been improved since the previous game. Not only this, but the story was captivating, the quests were exciting, and the voice acting was top-notch. In short, if you, like our writer, constantly fall victim to the true BBEG of D&D, i.e. scheduling conflicts, then this is the best way to get your dungeon and/or dragon fix. Number 43, Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, 2004, PS2, 95.08%. Oh, hi again, Rockstar. The second Grand Theft Auto title on today's list is 2004's San Andreas, the follow-up to Vice City. The story follows Carl C.J. Johnson, who returns home following the murder of his mother and slowly falls back in with his old gang, making enemies of the authorities and other criminals in the process. Taking place in 1992 in the fictional state of San Andreas, whose three major cities are based on Los Angeles, San Francisco, and Las Vegas, the title combines a variety of different gameplay styles, featuring elements of action-adventure, role-playing, and even stealth. Like its predecessor, Grand Theft Auto San Andreas released to universal critical acclaim, with reviewers lining up to bestow praise upon everything from the game's massive open world to its story and voice acting.
I'll have 2 number 9s.
Despite becoming embroiled in a variety of controversies, including the famous hot coffee scandal, San Andreas went on to sell over 27.5 million copies, and is the best-selling PS2 game of all time, outselling the next best, Gran Turismo 3 A-Spec, by nearly 2.5 million units. It also earned loads of awards, including the Spike TV Game of the Year accolade, and the Console Action-Adventure Game of the Year at the Interactive Achievement Awards. Right, I think we've sang this game's praises enough. Time to move on. Number 42, Portal 2, 2011, PC, 95.16%. If you like big holes, snarky robots, and British comedian Stephen Merchant, then by golly, are you gonna love this next entry. Released in 2011, Portal 2 is the follow-up to the game-changing Portal, a title which, to our utter amazement, didn't make it onto this list. Well, it kind of did, but not by itself. Oh, don't worry, we'll get to that in a bit. Portal 2 once again places players into the long-fall boots of Chell, a woman trapped inside the Aperture Science testing centre. Armed with nothing but an Aperture Science handheld portal device, she must complete a series of test chambers and outwit the utterly useless Wheatley, which is actually a great deal more difficult than it might seem. Most critics felt that Portal 2 was an improvement over its predecessor, and though some were apprehensive of the prospect of new gameplay additions, they walked away from the game feeling very satisfied. The story and writing in Portal 2 were also acclaimed, and the performances of Ellen McLean and Stephen Merchant as GLaDOS and Wheatley respectively were lauded as nothing short of brilliant. Finally, Portal 2's multiplayer mode, which starred robots Atlas and Peabody, was very well received, as it finally gave players the opportunity to solve puzzles alongside their friends. Which is great, because when you're frustrated you can't figure out a test chamber, you can lob a controller at your mate, instead of your living room wall. Number 41, Metal Gear Solid Ghost Babel, 2000, Game Boy Color, 95.61%. Although Konami Computer Entertainment Japan were originally commissioned to create a portable version of Metal Gear Solid, Ghost Babel actually wound up being completely different. Launched on the Game Boy Color in 2000, Ghost Babel, or simply Metal Gear Solid if you want to get everywhere outside of Japan about this, takes place 7 years after the events of Metal Gear Solid in an alternate timeline. Players control Foxhound operative Solid Snake as he is brought out of retirement in order to infiltrate the headquarters of a guerrilla group that has stolen a new Metal Gear prototype. Ghost Babel uses a similar overhead format to 1990s Metal Gear 2 Solid Snake, and sees players utilizing stealth in order to sneak into enemy strongholds, avoiding the attention of guards and various surveillance systems as they do so. According to game rankings, Metal Gear Solid Ghost Babel is the greatest Game Boy Color game ever made. Critics felt that even though there was a shift back to the perspective of the early 90s, the game felt very much modern in terms of its tone, aesthetic, and gameplay. The level of challenge on offer was also praised, as was the sheer length of the game. And though it did have a couple of issues, namely the controls and the teeny tiny radar, on the whole it was a fantastic way to get your Metal Gear Solid fix on the go.
Number 40, Chrono Trigger, 1995, SNES, 95.64%. We've already looked at the sequel, now get ready for the original. The RPG Chrono Trigger was first released in Japan in March 1995 for the SNES, before later making its way to North America in August that same year. Developed and published by Square, the game focuses on a group of adventurers as they bounce back and forth through time in order to prevent the destruction of the world at the hands of the creature Lavos. The story begins in 1000 CE, and over the course of the game, the party ends up in a number of different time periods, including the 6th century, the 12th millennium BC, BCE and the year 2300. Alas, they do not make it to the year 3000 and as such never get to find out if their great-great-great-granddaughter is pretty fine. I'm sure she's doing okay though. Fans of traditional RPGs will recognize a lot of Chrono Trigger's gameplay, and players will find themselves exploring the game's gorgeous 2D world with their little band of adventurers, speaking to the locals, procuring items, solving puzzles, and of course, battling enemies. Within just 2 months of the game's Japanese release, over 2 million copies of Chrono Trigger were sold. It didn't just shift like plops off a shovel though, it was also celebrated by critics who compared it favourably to the likes of The Secret of Mana and The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past, and praised its varied gameplay, visually pleasing graphics, and sense of humour. Number 39. The Last of Us Remastered, 2014. PS4, 95.7%. We could spend this entire entry debating whether The Last of Us really needed a remaster just a year after its original release, but I feel our time would be better spent just telling you how good it is instead. Side note from me, by the way, it did need a remaster, as with no backwards compatibility, the original release was stuck on PS3. Anyway, let's continue. The Last of Us, and naturally its remaster, tells the story of Joel, a survivor of a widespread fungal outbreak who, having lost his daughter at the beginning of said outbreak, works as a smuggler some 20 years later. After a brush with the Firefly's leader Marlene, Joel and his partner Tess end up embarking on a mission to smuggle the teenage Ellie out of the quarantine zone. The game heavily focuses on the narrative, with action-adventure gameplay supporting the nail-biting story. Players must traverse the infected, ravaged environment using a variety of weapons and stealth to take down or avoid the Cordyceps-infected mutants. Like the original, The Last of Us Remastered garnered universal acclaim, with critics bestowing praise upon the deep, emotional story, the complex characters, the relationship that forms between Joel and Ellie, and the outstanding voice performances of the entire cast, particularly those of Troy Baker and Ashley Johnson, who played Joel and Ellie respectively. A sequel released in 2020, followed by a remake of The Last of Us in 2022, and an HBO TV series in 2023. With a tabletop role-playing game on the way, it doesn't seem like we'll see the last of this franchise for some time. Number 38. BioShock Infinite, 2013. PS3. 95.94%. We're taking a trip into the clouds now to look at 2013's BioShock Infinite, the third title in the venerable BioShock series. Unlike BioShocks 1 and 2, which take place in the underwater city of Rapture, Infinite is set in the airborne city of Columbia and follows Booker DeWitt as he travels to the city in search of a young woman named Elizabeth. He's quickly drawn into a class war between Columbia's elite and its underclass, and things get very weird when it's revealed that Elizabeth possesses the ability to manipulate tears in the space-time continuum. BioShock Infinite is a first-person shooter, and as such, players will find themselves gunning down a wide variety of enemies with a number of different weapons. Additionally, Booker can be augmented using vigors which grant him superhero-like abilities, allowing the protagonist to do things like summon a murder of murderous crows or possess enemies. Infinite very much felt like a return to form for the BioShock series, because whilst BioShock 2 wasn't bad by any stretch, it wasn't nearly as good as the OG BioShock, whereas Infinite came very close to replicating the critical success of the original. The story was considered by critics to be one of the very best in gaming, and further praise was directed towards the setting, gameplay, and exploration of mature themes, elements which all came together to make a game that was infinitely better than most. That's that Ken Levine magic for you. Number 37. Metal Gear Solid 2 Sons of Liberty, 2001. PS2. 96%. Here it is, yet another stellar title from the man, the myth, the legend, the best friend of Jeff Keighley, Hideo Kojima. God, you'd think he was good at making video games or something, wouldn't you? Show off. Although fans expected Metal Gear Solid 2 Sons of Liberty to once again follow the exploits of Metal Gear Solid protagonist Solid Snake, they ended up getting a bit of a shock, as the vast majority of the sequel puts them in control of rookie agent Raiden. The story, which mostly takes place 4 years after the events of Metal Gear Solid, sees a group of terrorists threatening to cause a massive environmental disaster and murder the President of the United States if their demands aren't met, and it's up to you to set things right. The protagonist may be different, but the stealth gameplay remains, and players will spend much of the game's runtime lurking in the shadows and trying to avoid the prying eyes of various enemies. Unsurprisingly, Metal Gear Solid 2 was a hit with critics who dubbed the game a must-play. The stealth gameplay was highly praised, the graphics were lauded, and the ambitious script, which explored a variety of themes, was generally well received. There were some who were unhappy with Solid Snake's replacement,
Whatever.
and one or two didn't care for the complex story, but these minor flaws weren't enough to prevent the game from attaining greatness. Number 36. The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, 2023. Switch, 96%. The second most recent title on today's list is May 2023's The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, the follow-up to 2017's Breath of the Wild. In this Switch exclusive, which takes place at the very end of the Legend of Zelda timeline, players step into the shoes of Link as he searches for Princess Zelda and attempts to stop the Demon King Ganondorf from destroying the world. Fairly standard Zelda stuff, but hey, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Like Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom takes place in a vast open world which players can explore freely. In addition to Hyrule, players can also visit the sky, which is made up of several floating islands, and the depths, and they can do this on foot, horseback, using a paraglider, or by building some strange contraption which shouldn't look like it flies, but actually flies really well, slightly wonkily, but look at it go, it's doing so well. Shrines make a return, and completing them allows players to increase Link's health or stamina bar. You'll also be pleased to hear that the Korok seeds are also back, only this time there's 1,000 of the buggers to find. Of the 151 publications that reviewed Tears of the Kingdom, a staggering 85 gave it a perfect score of 100 out of 100. The expansion of the open world and the addition of the Sky Islands were lauded, the new powers and building features were greatly appreciated, and the story was highly praised. There won't be any tears when you pick up this title, that's for sure. Number 35. Gran Turismo, 1997. PlayStation, 96%. Here it is, boys, girls, and others, the very best racing game of all time. Apparently, according to this number anyway. Not only is Gran Turismo the best reviewed driving title in the history of gaming, but it's also the best-selling PlayStation game ever, outselling the next best, Final Fantasy VII, by over 800,000 copies. Like many other racing games, Gran Turismo allows players to choose a car and then tasks them with beating the competition, be they AI or otherwise. 2 different modes are available. Players can race freely in arcade mode or attain varying levels of driver's license in order to compete in events in simulation mode. Gran Turismo boasts 11 racetracks, each of which comes with a reversed option and a whopping 140 cars. Though just 16 critics reviewed Gran Turismo, only one gave the game a score of less than 90 out of 100, and 7 even went as far as to award it perfect scores. Praise was directed at the graphics, gameplay, and realism, with several outlets lauding just how many options players were given when it came to tuning their vehicles. Some were less than pleased with the driver's license mechanic, which they felt was something of a barrier to their fun, but in fairness to Gran Turismo, it was going for realism, and I dare any of those reviewers to get behind the wheel of a car without a license and see how far it gets them. Hope you like prison food is all I'm saying. Number 34. The Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker, 2002. GameCube, 96%. We hope you brought your sea legs, because we're about to take to the ocean now with our good pal Link, who's making so many appearances on this list that we're starting to think that he's got something on all of those video game critics out there. Critics, blink twice if you need help. 2002 GameCube exclusive The Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker takes place on a number of islands situated in a vast sea, and it's up to everyone's favourite Peter Pan lookalike to sail around so that he can find his sister who's been kidnapped by Ganondorf. Always kidnapping women, that one. What's he like? Though The Wind Waker bears a number of similarities to its predecessors, it is something of a departure from the usual Zelda formula. The dungeons and puzzles are still there, however much of the exploration is done via boat, and the art style is much more cartoony than fans of the series had been used to. Despite all of these changes, however, The Wind Waker went down a treat with both critics and players. The new visuals gave reviewers the feeling of playing through a cartoon, with several likening the cel-shaded graphics to the art styles of Disney and Hayao Miyazaki. They also very much enjoyed the gameplay, though some were a bit skeptical about the new sailing elements, as well as the controls, soundtrack, and story. Number 33. Half-Life, 1998. PC, 96%. Better turn on that AC, because things are about to get hot and hunky in here. In Valve's seminal first-person shooter, Half-Life, players control bespectacled hunk Gordon Freeman, a theoretical physicist working at the Black Mesa Research Facility. Sadly, the day we meet Gordon is not one of his better ones, and after a portal is opened allowing through hostile aliens, the glasses-wearing Beefcake must defend himself both from the aliens and the task force that has been sent in to cover the whole thing up. In addition to shooting headcrabs in their stupid faces, players must solve puzzles in order to help Gordon make it out alive. Though he is occasionally assisted by friendly NPCs, they are few and far between, and our boy is largely left to deal with the threat all by himself. At the time of its release, many critics regarded Half-Life to be the finest first-person shooter of all time, commending its fast-paced gameplay, puzzles, and its immersive and interactive world. According to Valve co-founder Gabe Newell, the studio predicted that only around 180,000 copies of Half-Life would be sold. However, the game proved to be a hit, and in 2008 it was awarded the Guinness World Record for being the best-selling PC PC first-person shooter of all time, having shifted more than 9 million units. I suppose if you need something estimating, Gabe Newell is not the man to call. Number 32. The Elder Scrolls V Skyrim, 2011. Xbox 360, 96%. As much as we may poke fun at it for its silly little glitches and the fact that it gets re-released more often than Adam says the C word, which is pretty bloody often.
It is. Yeah. After dark.
Potty mouth. There's no denying that The Elder Scrolls V Skyrim is one of the greatest RPGs of all time. Set in the province of, you guessed it, Cyrodiil, just joking, it's obviously Skyrim. The Elder Scrolls V centers on the player-created Dragonborn, who after escaping execution winds up on a quest to defeat the dragon Alduin, who is prophesied to destroy the world. Skyrim takes place in a sprawling open world populated by hundreds of interesting NPCs, ferocious monsters, and secrets that are just waiting to be uncovered. Players can get straight on with slaying the dragon if they want, or they can spend tens of hours wandering around picking up side quests and leveling their character until they're ridiculously powerful. After all, the only thing cooler than slaying a dragon is slaying a dragon and barely breaking a sweat. Aside from some grumbling about the odd glitch here and there, critics were generally well chuffed with Skyrim, with everything from its audio-visual presentation to the sheer amount of content being praised by reviewers. And at the end of the day, even the glitches were pretty darned entertaining. Right, James? Oh, James can't talk right now. He's been launched into the stratosphere by a giant. See you soon, James. Number 31. The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess, 2006. GameCube, 96%. Well, this is getting silly, isn't it? Half the damned list is Legend of Zelda, bloody Nintendo making such good games. Ridiculous. Another offering for the GameCube, though not exclusively like The Wind Waker, Twilight Princess stars Link and tells the story of how he falls in love with a sparkly vampire.
This is the skin of a killer bell.
Hang on, no, that's a different Twilight. This one's about trying to stop Hyrule from being engulfed by a parallel dimension. That's the right one. Link does turn into a wolf, though, so in that respect, it is rather similar to Twilight, I think. He keeps his shirt firmly on, though, the tease. The gameplay is relatively standard Zelda fare, with the main difference from previous entries being that Link transforms into a wolf when he enters the Twilight realm, losing the ability to use his sword and shield, but gaining a bite attack and increased speed. Who needs a knife when you've got big teeth, eh? Though Twilight Princess was released on both the GameCube and the Wii, it was the previous gen iteration that garnered the highest average review score. Though some felt that the graphics weren't as technically impressive as some other games of the time, this minor flaw wasn't enough to prevent several outlets from calling the game the best Zelda title to that point. The art style was stunning, the wolf mechanic was considered innovative, and the gameplay was tight, addictive, and enjoyable. Definitely one worth sinking your teeth into. That's both a wolf and a Twilight joke for you there. Don't say we don't give you stuff. Peter?
Number 30. The House in Fata Morgana, Dreams of the Revenants Edition, 2021, Switch, 96%. Although The House in Fata Morgana was originally released in 2012, it wasn't until the Dreams of the Revenants Edition made its way to the Switch some 9 years later that it got the critical appreciation it truly deserves. This visual novel takes place in a mansion during several different time periods, the years 1099, 1603, 1707, and 1869. Nice. And tells the story of an amnesiac spirit as she tries to regain her lost memories with the help of a maid. Being a visual novel, The House in Fata Morgana is somewhat light on gameplay, so players simply need to read along, choose dialogue options, and soak in the delightful narrative. The beautiful artwork and atmospheric soundtrack were both commended by critics, but it was the game's story that earned it the vast majority of its praise. Most publications agreed that whilst the story was dark and, in places, downright uncomfortable to experience, it was a worthwhile journey to embark upon. Not only was it incredibly well written, it was genuinely moving, with several critics admitting the game brought them to tears and stayed with them long after the credits rolled. Though its hard-hitting story definitely isn't for everyone, for those who like their tales filled with love, loss, and heartbreak, The House in Fata Morgana is an experience unlike any other. Number 29. Mass Effect 2, 2010, Xbox 360, 96%. I'm gonna be honest, I'm shocked this is the only Mass Effect entry on this list. After all, the entire trilogy is nothing short of stellar, no pun intended, so it comes as a real surprise that only the second game earned itself a spot amongst the best of all time. To Mass Effect and Mass Effect 3, we still love you. Developed by BioWare and published by EA, boo, EA, Mass Effect 2 continues the epic space opera that began in Mass Effect 1, and follows Commander Shepard as they embark upon a mission to recruit a diverse team in order to undertake a suicide mission and put a stop to the Collectors, an insectoid race from a realm beyond the Omega-4 mass relay. In this third-person RPG, the player's choices can massively impact the story, and Shepard's morality is measured using Paragon and Renegade points, depending on whether they tend to lean on charm or aggression. Though the original Mass Effect earned itself a great deal of praise from critics, most agreed that Mass Effect 2 was an improvement in every way. The gameplay and combat were much tighter, the setting was darker and more detailed, and the game's cinematography, particularly in cutscenes and during conversation, was much better than in the first game. So, if you're after a spacefaring RPG, they don't come much better than Mass Effect 2. Number 28, Elden Ring, 2022, Xbox Series X, 96%. If it hadn't been so bloody excellent, we might have been a bit mad at Elden Ring for taking George R.R. Martin's attention away from the A Song of Ice and Fire series. Hurry up and bloody well finish them already, George. But luckily, Elden Ring was very, very good, so we'll give Mr. Martin a pass. For now. I expect to see the pre-orders for Winds of Winter being advertised in the next 6 months though, alright? It's not gonna happen, is it? Elden Ring was developed by From Software, the studio responsible for the controller-throwingly difficult Dark Souls series, and puts players into the shoes of the Tarnished, one of many exiles from the Lands Between, who has been summoned back after the titular Elden Ring was shattered. Unlike Dark Souls and Bloodborne, Elden Ring takes place in an open world, which players are free to explore however they'd like. The vast majority of beings in the Lands Between are hostile, and players will need to carefully study each enemy's attack patterns if they've any hopes of besting their foes. Elden Ring was one of the most highly anticipated games of 2022, and it's safe to say it did not disappoint. The vast open world, rich lore, and stunning design of the game all earned it critical acclaim, and while some were divided over the lack of an easy mode, others felt that Elden Ring was the most accessible Souls-like title to date on account of the fact that players could avoid encounters if they wished, and come back to them later once they got good. Number 27, Tekken 3, 1998, PlayStation, 96%. As its title would suggest, Tekken 3 is the third entry into the Tekken series of fighting games. Originally released in arcades in 1997 before being ported to the PlayStation in 1998, Tekken 3 takes place some 15 years after the events of Tekken 2. By which point Kazuya Mishima and Jun Kazama's son, Jin, is in his teens. When Jun becomes a target of the malevolent creature Ogre, Jin seeks out Kazuya and begs him for training so he can defeat Ogre once and for all. Meanwhile, Kazuya's father, Heihachi, attempts to track down Ogre so he can capture it and harness its power for his own means. Tekken 3 retains and improves upon the fighting gameplay of its predecessors, but gives players a whole smorgasbord of new characters to get to grips with. In addition, a new minigame called Tekken Force keeps things nice and varied, giving players the opportunity to side-scroll through a number of beat-em-up style stages and defeat a whole bunch of enemies and bosses. The game was an overwhelming success, both critically and commercially, with reviewers embracing the new characters and applauding the responsive controls, improved fighting mechanics, and detailed graphics. In fact, you might say that both players and critics have really Tekken to this game. What do you mean we've made that joke in a previous list and it wasn't funny then either? How rude. Number 26, Batman Arkham City, 2011, PS3, 96%. Somewhat surprisingly, Batman Arkham City is the only Batman title gracing today's list, or Dick Grayson today's list, you might say. Never mind. And that's a little shocking to us, considering just how many fantastic Batman games there have been over the years. We ranked them all, and they were mostly terrible. The sequel to 2009's Batman Arkham Asylum sees the Bat in Black incarcerated in the titular Arkham City super prison alongside some classic DC villains, including the one and only Joker. Not only must he contend with the fact that the Joker has infected him with the Titan formula, but he must also try to put a stop to Warden Hugo Strange, who plans to deal with Gotham's crime problem in a rather unconventional way. Like Asylum, City puts players in control of Brucey Dubs as he swooshes about the place using various bat gadgets to achieve his ends. Unlike Asylum, however, City is set in an open world that Batman can explore freely, and he's even able to pick up side quests as he goes. Several levels also allow players to slip into the tight latex bodysuit of Catwoman and stick it to goons with claws and a whip. Asylum set the bar for superhero games high, and City gracefully glided over it, did a flip, and nailed the landing. Everything from the new open world format to the wide variety of villains was praised by critics, and several publications called it the best superhero game ever made. Put it this way, if you haven't played Arkham City, you must be absolutely bats, man. Haha. Gotham. Number 25. Resident Evil 4, 2005. GameCube. 96%. It's time for another visit from everyone's favourite floppy-haired himbo now, only this time he's off to Spain. Resident Evil 4, the follow-up to Resident Evil 3 Nemesis, sees the return of Leon S. Kennedy, who's had something of a promotion since we saw him in Resident Evil 2, as he's now working for the US government and has been sent on a special mission to rescue the president's kidnapped daughter, Baby Eagle. Sorry, Ashley. Upon arriving in a rural Spanish village, however, he finds he's signed on for rather more than he'd bargained for, as all of the villagers are part of a parasite-worshipping cult led by the utterly deranged Osmond Sadler. Unlike its predecessors, Resident Evil 4 is more of an action game than a survival horror and fully leans into the campier side of the series. There are still survival horror elements, checkpoints are limited and resources are scarce, but players can be a little more liberal with their application of bullets to cultists' faces. The game got a spectacular reception from critics, who complimented everything from the story and characters to the action-packed gameplay, and for perhaps the first time in the series' history, the voice acting was also lauded by reviewers, who were particularly pleased with the performance of Leon's voice actor, Paul Mercier. Some did lament the slightly goofy writing. Where's everyone going? Bingo, indeed. But we would say that it's just not Resident Evil if the characters don't occasionally talk like they've never interacted with another human before. Now is it? Number 24. GoldenEye 007, 1997, N64, 96%. Here's a fun fact for you. Despite being named for the 1995 film GoldenEye, the N64 exclusive GoldenEye 007 actually didn't come out until 2 years after the movie, coinciding with the release of Tomorrow Never Dies instead. This information has no bearing on the quality of the game, but our writer just thought you might like to know that. GoldenEye 007 stars everyone's favourite womanizing British spy, James Bond, who embarks on a mission to stop a criminal syndicate from using a satellite weapon. Players control Lil Jimmy across multiple different levels, using various firearms and weapons to dispatch a series of baddies. Additionally, Bond is equipped with a variety of gadgets that can be used to achieve a number of objectives, like an electromagnetic watch that helps him acquire the key to a jail cell. Expectations for the game were pretty low to begin with, but upon its release, GoldenEye 007 received universal critical acclaim. The detailed environments intense, realistic animations and music were all lauded by critics, and at the time, it was considered the best multiplayer title on the N64. Not only is GoldenEye 007 one of the greatest games ever made, it's also thought to be one of the most important first-person shooters of all time, proving that the genre didn't need to be confined to the PC and blazing the trail for console shooters. Basically, the likes of Halo, Call of Duty, and more or less any other console shooter you can think of owe an awful lot to GoldenEye 007. I'm sure you can just pay in martinis, shaken, not stirred. Number 23, BioShock 2007, Xbox 360. 96%. Now I know what some of you are going to say. Peter, why are you guys at TripleJump always harping on about BioShock when its inspiration, the System Shock series, is far superior? Well, dear viewer, the answer in this case is simple. This is an objective list based on average review scores, and the sad truth of the matter is that even the highest scoring System Shock title only got 92 out of 100. Ergo, BioShock is better than System Shock. Oh, is that torches and pitchforks I can see in the distance? 2007's BioShock takes place in the underwater city of Rapture and sees protagonist Jack being recruited by the friendly-sounding Irishman Atlas to kill the dystopia's creator, Andrew Ryan. In this FPS, players control Jack as he roams the halls of Rapture, taking out splicers, big daddies, and more as he tries to locate Ryan and dispense some justice, Tiger Woods style. Thankfully though, he doesn't just have to rely on guns, as he's able to augment himself with plasmids that effectively give him superpowers. BioShock released to, rapturous applause. Get it? And critics were falling over themselves to bestow the game with praise. Its tight first-person shooter gameplay was applauded, as were the graphics, the design of Rapture, the narrative, and the twist ending, which is, in our writer's opinion at least, nothing short of the greatest video game rug pull of all time. With 2 sequels under its belt and another on the way, supposedly, it doesn't seem like we've seen the last of BioShock, and we think that's a very good thing. Number 22, Half-Life 2, 2004, PC, 96%. 2 visits from bespectacled hunk Gordon Freeman in one list? Aren't we lucky? After being in stasis for around 20 years, old Gordy is awakened in Half-Life 2 to find out the portal opened in the previous game attracted the attention of some not-so-friendly aliens, who proceeded to conquer Earth in just 7 hours, and in the years since have kept those who survived locked in an authoritarian regime. Alongside several members of the Resistance, Gordon must fight to liberate Earth from its extraterrestrial oppressors. Like the original Half-Life, Half-Life 2 is a first-person shooter with puzzle elements, but it puts its own spin on the formula with the addition of the gravity gun, which allows Gordon to pick up objects such as saw blades and barrels and fire them at unsuspecting enemies. Half-Life was a great game, and for Half-Life 2, Valve took everything they'd learned from the previous title to make improvements in the sequel. The story was a big hit with both players and critics, as were the graphics, design, and the addition of the gravity gun, which is easily one of the best weapons in all of gaming. There were a handful of critics that complained that Half-Life 2 was too short, but as we've said previously on this channel, if your only complaint is that you didn't get enough of a good thing, then is that really a criticism? Anyway, I sure hope you're not sick of talking about Half-Life 2 just yet, because it's time for number 21, The Orange Box, 2007, Xbox 360, 96.36%.
Now wait just a bleeding minute.
I hear you screech like a flipping banshee at your screen.
I thought you didn't include collections in these things.
Well, dear viewer, we don't. Except for when we do, which is now. What are you gonna do about it? Phone the police? Don't phone the police. I can't go back to jail. Anyway, comprising 5 different games, Half-Life 2, Half-Life 2 Episode 1, Half-Life 2 Episode 2, Portal, and Team Fortress 2, the Orange Box is nothing short of the best video game compilation of all time. Its main selling point was Half-Life 2 Episode 2, which was a brand new release. However, players were floored by the quality of the other games included in the collection, especially Portal, which was something of a surprise hit. Every one of the games in the Orange Box garnered critical acclaim in and of itself, with reviewers lavishing praise upon Half-Life 2 and its duo of episodes for their addictive gameplay and exciting stories, on Team Fortress 2 for its fun multiplayer gunplay, and on Portal for its innovative mechanics and razor-sharp wit. Each of the 5 games is wonderful in its own right, but when they all come together, they create something that is far greater than the sum of its parts, and for that reason alone, there was absolutely no way we could leave the Orange Box off this list. Even if that does make it a wildcard entry! Okay, let's move on.
Number 20, Super Mario 64, 1996 N64, 96.41%. Prior to the release of Super Mario 64, Nintendo's little mustachioed plumber had always been presented in just 2 dimensions. However, in the early 90s, Shigeru Miyamoto decided that Mario needed a little something extra, and so, in 1996, the 3D sensation Super Mario 64 was born. In Super Mario 64, Princess Peach is, once again, imprisoned by Bowser, who has hidden her castle's 120 power stars inside a bunch of paintings, and it's up to Mario to enter each of them, retrieve the stars, and rescue the princess. The game is made up of 15 platforming levels, in which Mario must run, crouch, crawl, climb, swim, perform 2/3 of a triple jump, perform an entire triple jump, and much, much more in order to collect all of the power stars. Prior to its release, audiences were massively hyped for Super Mario 64, and it did not disappoint. The vast majority of publications awarded it scores in the 90s and praised the game's stunning 3D environments, gorgeously colourful visuals, intuitive control scheme, and replayability. Super Mario 64 went on to win several Game of the Year awards and ultimately sold nearly 12 million copies, making it the best-selling Nintendo 64 game of all time. Amazing what an extra dimension can do, isn't it? Number 19, Uncharted 2 Among Thieves, 2009, PlayStation 3, 96.43%. The first and only appearance on today's list from scallywag Nathan Drake is his turn in Uncharted 2 Among Thieves, the 2009 follow-up to 2007's Drake's Fortune. Among Thieves takes place just 2 years after the events of the previous Uncharted, and sees treasure hunters Nathan Drake, Chloe Fraser, and Elena Fisher searching for the Chintamani Stone and the fabled city of Shambhala. Sadly, they're not the only ones looking, and they must contend with war criminal Zoran Lazarevic, who also wishes to get his hands on the stone. Players control Nathan Drake from a third-person perspective, and must utilise his dexterity, weapons expertise, and adeptedness at stealth to navigate a variety of locales, taking down enemies where necessary. Uncharted 2 Among Thieves was universally acclaimed by critics, who were blown away by its stylish set pieces, story, multiplayer, the performances of the mocap actors, and their voice acting. Reviewers also directed a great deal of praise towards the cinematic feel of the game, commending it for making them feel like they were playing through a movie. Not only did it sell a whopping 6.5 million copies, but it was bestowed with over 300 awards, 200 of which were Game of the Year accolades, which is honestly just silly, though not that surprising. After all, Nathan Drake is famous for hoarding loot, isn't he? Number 18, Super Metroid, 1994, SNES, 96.55%. We've already talked about Metroid, and by this point, you might be wondering when we're going to get to the Vania. Well, sorry to disappoint you, but the highest scoring Castlevania title, Symphony of the Night, just missed out on a spot on today's list. Not to worry though, we've got more Metroid to make up for it. As is the case for every other Metroid title, Super Metroid focuses on space bounty hunter Samus Aran, and follows her as she embarks on a quest to the planet Zebes to retrieve an infant Metroid creature that's been stolen by the notorious notorious space pirate Ridley. When it comes to gameplay, Super Metroid sees players side-scrolling their way through 2D maps in order to find power-ups which can then be used to access areas that Samus was previously unable to. In fact, it was this game and Castlevania Symphony of the Night which helped to establish the Metroidvania genre, one which remains very popular to this day. Expectations were high for Super Metroid, but thankfully it lived up to them all. Many reviewers were impressed with the graphics and sound, which were at the time state of the art, as well as the massive size of the title and the auto-mapping feature. There were some who were less pleased with the controls, but although they were occasionally slightly awkward, they didn't detract from the overall experience, which was nothing short of spectacular. Number 17, NFL 2K1 2000, Dreamcast, 97%. Ugh, fine. Since this is the last sports game on this list, I'll do Ben's thing. Oh yeah, here we go, sports time. I've talked about an American football game before, Madden NFL 2004, but I haven't talked about an American football game recently, so I'm going to give it everything I've got. There, happy now? The final and therefore best sports title in today's video is the Sega published and Visual Concepts developed NFL 2K1, the first follow-up to the also critically acclaimed NFL 2K. Like its predecessor, NFL 2K1 is an American football simulator, so the aim of the game is to outmaneuver your opponent in order to score as many touchdowns as possible. NFL 2K1 came with a whole load of gameplay improvements that made it superior to NFL 2K, including a greater number of player animations, improved AI, larger playbooks, and changes to the running game, passing game, and defense. And I can confidently tell you that I have no idea what any of those last three things are, but they sure sound impressive. In addition to all of this, NFL 2K1 also had a multi-franchise season mode and online play, features that NFL 2K were sadly missing. All of those enhancements proved to be a hit with critics, and NFL 2K1 ended up garnering the highest average review score of any sports game ever. It's just a shame it only ever released on the Dreamcast, so hardly anyone ever got to play it. Number 16, Halo Combat Evolved, 2001, Xbox, 97%. Indeed, it turns out the original Halo is still the best, and although the vast majority of games bearing the Halo moniker are great, none have, to date, surpassed Halo Combat Evolved in the quality stakes. The first title in the venerable Halo series introduces players to Super Soldier Master Chief, who, along with a number of allies, embarks on a mission to put a stop to religious fanatics, the Covenant, and the parasitic Flood, all whilst trying to uncover the secrets of the titular Halo Ringworld. A first-person shooter through and through, Halo gives players the opportunity to shoot a variety of aliens in their stupid faces using a plethora of sci-fi weaponry. They'll also get the chance to operate a bunch of different vehicles from 4x4s to alien aircraft, and if they'd rather not go it alone, they can get their friends in on the action thanks to Halo's multiplayer mode. Critics called Halo the most important launch game for any console ever, and were unanimous in their belief that it was worth buying an Xbox just to play Halo. It seemed the developer, Bungie, had taken all the best elements of great first-person shooters of years past and carefully stitched them all together to create something truly great. Specifically, critics called out the game's balance, the array of vehicles, and the AI as reasons why Halo Combat Evolved was one of the best first-person shooters of all time. One of, but not the best. We'll get to that shortly. Number 15, Grand Theft Auto 3, 2001, PlayStation 2, 97%. If you put Grand Theft Auto 2 and Grand Theft Auto 3 side by side, you'd be hard-pressed to tell they were from the same series. It turns out, however, that change can be a good thing, as thanks to GTA 3, the series went from earning middling average review scores in the 60s and 70s to being one of the best video game franchises in the world. Set in the fictional Liberty City, which is loosely based on New York, GTA 3 tells the story of Claude, a silent protagonist, who winds up on a quest for vengeance after his girlfriend leaves him for dead. GTA 3 is the first game in the Grand Theft Auto series to be played from a third-person perspective as opposed to a top-down one. Aside from the main quest, players can roam the city, pick up side missions, and even do a crime or two if they wish. Though watch out for those pesky cops, because if you're caught doing a bad, they'll be on you like flies on plops. games. Critics had nothing but good things to say about GTA 3, and they welcomed the switch from 2D to 3D with open arms. A number of reviewers commented positively on the character and vehicle models, as well as the texture quality around the city, which was really quite impressive for the time. The missions and story were also praised, as was the soundtrack, voice acting, and the in-game radio stations. Number 14, Metroid Prime, 2002, GameCube, 97%. It would seem that Metroid games are a bit like buses. You wait ages for one, and then two come along at once. Metroid Prime, released for the GameCube in 2002, wasn't just the first Metroid title released in 8 years, with the aforementioned Super Metroid having released in 1994, but was also the first ever Metroid game to be presented in first person and 3D. Samus Aran makes a triumphant return, however, and she's once again embroiled in a conflict with the space pirates and their horrendous biological experiments, this time on the planet Talon 4. Though the 2D side-scrolling may be gone, Metroid Prime is still a Metroidvania through and through, and players can expect plenty of puzzles, power-ups, and backtracking. Only this time it can all be experienced from a first-person perspective and in glorious 3D. Metroid Prime released to universal critical acclaim and earned itself a boatload of Game of the Year awards. Critics were incredibly pleased with the highly detailed 3D environments, the innovative gameplay that places its focus squarely on exploration, and its faithfulness to the tried and true Metroid formula. The game went on to spawn not one, but 2 sequels, and was remastered in 2023. So even though it's over 2 decades old, it would seem that this particular title is still in its prime. I'm here all week, try the fish. Number 13, Perfect Dark, 2000, N64, 97%. Despite multiple publications dubbing Halo Combat Evolved as the greatest first-person shooter of all time, it turns out that it actually isn't, at least if the numbers are to be believed, as that particular accolade goes to N64 title Perfect Dark, released the year prior. The spiritual successor to Rare's 1997 hit GoldenEye 007, Perfect Dark focuses on Joanna Dark, an agent working for the Carrington Institute Research Center. Set in the distant future of 2023, the game sees Joanna attempting to thwart a conspiracy surrounding Datadyne, a rival corporation who are in league with alien race, the Skedar. These lizard-like extraterrestrials have promised the dastardly defense contractor enough alien technology to make them the biggest corporation on the planet, if Datadyne will provide them with code-breaking AI that will allow them to access a spacecraft at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean. Very nefarious indeed. Perfect Dark's gameplay bears a lot of similarities to GoldenEye 007, and even runs on an updated version of its engine. Players step into Joanna Dark's shoes, and must make their way through a series of levels, killing enemies using a variety of different weapons and/or stealth.
Hey there.
Hiya. Perfect Dark went down a treat with critics, who used words like phenomenal, compelling, and unparalleled to describe it. Genuinely surprised that no one thought to call it the perfect first-person shooter. But then again, not everyone enjoys silly jokes like I do. Number 12, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3, 2001, PlayStation 2, 97%. Core, mother flippers! It's time for yet another visit from the Birdman. Hope you brought him some seeds. That's what Tony Hawk eats, right? Seeds and grains and the like. The third Tony Hawk's game to make it onto today's list also happens to be the third game in the Tony Hawk series. Coincidence? Yes. Interesting. No, actually, not particularly. Like those that came before it, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 is a title in which players choose a skater and then have to perform a variety of tricks in order to obtain certain goals. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 is the first title in the series to introduce the revert, which allows vert combos to be tied together using a manual, which means much longer combos and, as such, more points. It's also the first Tony Hawk's Pro Skater game with online capabilities, which allowed players to connect with one another by the power of the internet. How futuristic. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 was a massive success both critically and commercially, with reviewers falling over themselves to compliment the game, and sales figures topping 2 million units by July 2006. The graphics, soundtrack, and the introduction of the revert were all applauded by critics, and the vast levels and the fact that players could combo off of practically any object were also highly praised. You might say that Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 is a truly excellent game. That was a bird pun. Number 11, Disco Elysium The Final Cut, 2021, PC, 97%. The original version of Disco Elysium was released in 2019 and earned a very respectable average review score of 91 out of 100. Clearly though, this wasn't good enough for developer and publisher Arkham, as just over a year later, they announced that an extended version was in development, and in March 2021, Disco Elysium The Final Cut was released. Regardless of which version you play through, the story remains the same. Players take control of Harry Dubois, an alcoholic amnesiac detective who is charged with solving a murder mystery, but who uncovers some uncomfortable truths about himself along the way. Though Disco Elysium is a role-playing game, players won't find themselves leveling up combat abilities and engaging in traditional fights, as the game's outcomes are decided by skill checks. There are 4 major attributes: intellect, psyche, physique, and motorics, with each having 6 secondary skills, and players can improve these by leveling up. The Final Cut added voice work for the game's 300-odd characters, alongside quests that were cut from the original, new art and animations, and additional music tracks. Critics enjoyed everything about the Final Cut that they enjoyed about the original, i.e. the storytelling, artwork and conversational systems, and also lauded the addition of new voice lines and the extra quests, which were the proverbial cherries atop the slightly alcohol-soaked sundae. Number 10.5, Baldur's Gate 3, 2023, PC, 97%. No, we haven't gone mad. There's a very good reason we added an extra entry into this list. We said that, at the time of writing, Baldur's Gate 3 didn't have enough professional reviews to qualify for this list. However, it's now got enough and has gone down so well that we simply couldn't not talk about it. So to save our writer having to go back through and renumber every entry, we've given it its own special place on our list. Also, that thing we said about Tears of the Kingdom being the most recent game in today's video is now untrue. Don't blame me. Blame Larian Studios for making such a bomb RPG. Baldur's Gate 3 follows a group of adventurers as they embark on a quest to try to remove the Mind Flayer tadpoles from their brains before they themselves are transformed by the tadpoles into Mind Flayers. Probably not a terrible fate if you're a fan of calamari, but not ideal otherwise. Players begin by either choosing a pre-made character or creating one of their own, picking from a variety of races, classes, spells, and appearance options. From there, they must explore the world to find the cure they seek, speaking to NPCs, helping them with their problems, and fighting a variety of creatures, all using the D&D 5th edition system. There was pretty much nothing the critics didn't like about Baldur's Gate 3. The RPG gameplay was tight, the story was magnificent, the plethora of options available to players was mind-boggling, the characters were well designed and brilliantly acted, and the environment and artwork were out of this world. The game was so well received, in fact, that several outlets called it the new industry standard for AAA titles, and it does seem that every fantasy RPG from now on is going to have its quality judged against Baldur's Gate 3. In short, Baldur's Gate 3 is the closest you're going to get to the Dungeons & Dragons tabletop experience without having to faff about with character sheets and polyhedral dice.
Number 10. The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, 2017. Switch, 97.33%. Oh, we're into the top 10 now. Things are really starting to heat up. Actually, it might just be that the office aircon's broken again. Can someone get on to Adam about this, please? I'm dying. Breath of the Wild is currently the second most recent game in the Legend of Zelda series, both in terms of its release and its place in series lore. It stars Link, who awakens from a century-long slumber to find Hyrule in turmoil. The game's big bad, Calamity Ganon, is sealed in Hyrule Castle, gaining strength by the day, and should he ever return to full power, he will break free and destroy the world, so it's up to Link to defeat him before he gets the chance. Players are treated to a stunning open world that's filled with exciting places to explore, interesting NPCs to talk to, and a variety of secrets to uncover. Critics were floored by Breath of the Wild, with several calling out the fact that it somehow managed to be completely innovative while still feeling like a Legend of Zelda game. The level of detail and immersion, stunning open world, and endless character interactions were all commended, and most agreed that it was the absolute best reason to own a Nintendo Switch. Even if you're not a fan of The Legend of Zelda, we can almost guarantee you'll go wild for this game. Oh, nearly done now. Number 9. Super Mario Galaxy 2, 2010. Wii, 97.35%. More from Mario and pals now, and this time he's off to space in Super Mario Galaxy 2. For his second galactic outing, Mario must once again pursue Bowser in outer space as he has kidnapped Princess Peach for the umpteenth time. Seriously, dude, she's not interested. Get yourself on Tinder and find yourself a girl who's actually into you. God. Not content with nicking women, Bowser has also taken over the galaxy, and so yet again, it's up to Mario to put things right. Players step into the brown shoes and blue overalls of the little mustachioed Italian plumber and guide him across multiple planets in order to collect power stars so that he can reach the center of the universe and stick it to Bowser. Each level is a planet, and in order to obtain the necessary power stars, players must complete each of the game's platforming challenges. Like its predecessor, which we'll get to in a bit, Super Mario Galaxy 2 was a massive success both critically and commercially. Numerous publications gave the game a perfect score, citing its level design, bright, colorful graphics, and addictive gameplay as reasons for doing so. There were some who felt that the increased difficulty was to the title's detriment, whilst others liked that the game was more challenging than the first Super Mario Galaxy. You can't please everyone, can you? Number 8. Super Mario Odyssey, 2017. Switch, 97.42%. 2 Super Mario games in a row? What is this? Somebody at Nintendo been slipping the writer bribes. Released in 2017, Super Mario Odyssey was the very first Super Mario title for the Switch and follows Mario as he embarks on a journey across a variety of kingdoms in order to once again rescue Princess Peach from the clutches of the evil Bowser, who intends to force her into marriage. Honestly, this woman really needs to beef up her personal security, or at least get a can of pepper spray. I don't know, that's probably victim blaming, but something needs to be done here. This can't keep happening. Like many previous Super Mario games, Odyssey is a 3D platformer, but it keeps things hot and fresh with the introduction of Cappy, a sentient hat that gives Mario the power to control objects and other characters, and I beg you not to think too hard on the implications of such an ability, because oh boy or girl or other will things get dark. Yes. Critics adored Super Mario Odyssey and commented on the fact that it was the perfect game for the hybrid Switch, as the missions lent themselves to a nice long gaming session, whilst the collecting of power moons was great for players on the go. Cappy was also a hit, and Nintendo was praised for taking risks with the gameplay, as this helped to breathe fresh life into the series, not that it really needed it, of course. It'll be a sad day when the world gets sick of Super Mario, let me tell you.
Number 7. Red Dead Redemption 2, 2018. Xbox One, 97.44%. Saddle up, you lot, because it's time for even more rootin' fun courtesy of our friends over at Rockstar. The very best game of 2018, Red Dead Redemption 2 is actually a prequel to its predecessor and tells the story of Arthur Morgan, an outlaw and member of the Vanderlyn gang, who must come to terms with the fact that his criminal way of life is coming to an end thanks to the advancement of society. He and his gangmates plan to do one last heist in order to secure their retirement. However, as is often the case with crime, things don't exactly pan out as they all intend. A game of the open-world RPG variety, Red Dead Redemption 2 plops players into the Wild West and gives them the opportunity to soak in all of the sights, embark on a variety of exciting quests, and generally enjoy the life of a gun-toting outlaw. Red Dead Redemption 2 released to universal critical acclaim, with publications falling over themselves to shower the title with compliments. Critics praised everything from the graphics, sound, and game design to the breathtaking and at times heartbreaking story, the flawed but likable characters, and the quality of the missions. If the series' trajectory thus far is anything to go by, we can only assume that Red Dead Redemption 3 will be nothing short of the greatest video game ever made. You know, if we ever actually get a Red Dead Redemption 3. Number 6. Super Mario Galaxy, 2007. Wii, 97.64%. The final Super Mario game to grace our list is Super Mario Galaxy for the Wii, and had it been left purely to game rankings, it would have actually taken the top spot. I'm sorry, Mario, Metacritic ruins everything. Once again, Princess Peach has been kidnapped by Bowser, only this time he's got far larger ambitions than just taking over the Mushroom Kingdom, and intends to create his own galaxy. In order to thwart Bowser's plans, Mario must journey across the universe and collect 120 power stars by exploring, completing missions, and fighting a variety of bosses. Once he's done, players get the opportunity to do a second, more difficult run as Luigi, whose life is harder, presumably because he's the less well-liked Mario brother. Aw, he's my favourite, if that's worth anything. Super Mario Galaxy released to universal critical acclaim, with its bright, colourful visuals garnering the vast majority of the praise. The game didn't just look pretty though. The gameplay was fun and innovative, the gravity mechanics were well received, and each level was wonderfully designed. Even the Wiimote controls, which were notorious for being somewhat on the janky side, were lauded by critics here, and really the only thing that anyone found to whinge about was the two-player mode, which some felt to be a bit on the shallow side. But you know what? Who even needs friends when you've got an entire galaxy to explore? Number 5. Soul Calibur, 1998. Dreamcast, 98%. Here it is, folks, the very best fighting game of all time. Developed by Project Soul and published by Namco, Soul Calibur is actually the second title in the Soul Calibur series, with Soul Edge, or Soul Blade if you want to get North American, European, Australian, and final appearance in this list from Simon Miller about this, making its debut 3 years earlier. This 3D weapons fighter centers on the legendary weapon Soul Edge and numerous warriors' pursuit of it. At the beginning of the game, the sword is in the hands of Nightmare, a nefarious character who slaughters scores of people with it for no other reason than to satiate the blade's bloodlust. Those who are after the sword either want it for themselves or wish to destroy it, thereby freeing Nightmare of his curse and ending his murder spree. Soul Calibur improves on the standard fighter formula by introducing the 8-way run, which means the combatants aren't confined to a single axis and can move around the battlefield quite freely. The game is also more forgiving when it comes to the timing of inputs, so players can send their next instruction to their chosen fighter before they've even finished their previous move, allowing for the execution of a quick succession of maneuvers. Because of these innovations, as well as its stunning visuals, great audio, and roster of interesting characters, critics lavished praise upon Soul Calibur. So much, in fact, that even a quarter of a century after its release, no fighting game has been able to surpass its quality.
Number 4, Grand Theft Auto 4, 2008, PlayStation 3, 98%. The penultimate title on today's list is one that would have maybe gotten a perfect score if only it didn't have our cousin ringing us every 5 minutes. I'm flipping busy, Roman. Call someone else. Grand Theft Auto 4 focuses on Nico Bellic, an Eastern European immigrant who moves to Liberty City in order to escape his criminal past. Once there, he moves to the suburb, meets a nice young woman and settles down with a dog, a couple of cats, and a goldfish called Terrence. Nah, just kidding. He leaves one life of crime and walks straight into another, only this one has more bowling. Like previous autos of the Grand Theft persuasion, GTA 4 takes place in a rather large open world which players can explore on foot or by acquiring, legally or otherwise, various vehicles. Crime is of the essence, which one would expect from a GTA title, but players can also engage in a spot of bowling or darts if they so choose. With a budget of over $100 million, GTA 4 is one of the most expensive video games ever made, but I think it's fair to say that Rockstar's money was very well spent. Liberty City is not only massive, but is jam-packed with things to do. The graphics were stunning for the time, the story was engaging, and the characters, whilst largely awful people, were fully realised and complex individuals. Whilst brilliant though, it would seem that GTA 4 isn't the best game ever made. In fact, it isn't even the best Grand Theft Auto of all time. Don't worry, we're getting to that. Number 3, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2, 2000, PlayStation, 98%. No, it's not deja vu. This is indeed the second time that a game by the name of Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2 has appeared on this list. However, this one is the home console version. Indeed, the Birdman may be used to taking home the gold, but today he's going to have to settle for bronze, as Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2 is only the third best video game of all time. I say only, but it's still a bloody brilliant achievement. Gameplay sees the player choosing a skater from the likes of Bob Burnquist, Eric Costin, and Bucky Lazek, and getting them to perform a variety of tricks and collect objects scattered around each level. The main difference between Pro Skater 2 and its predecessor is the fact that Pro Skater 2 introduced the manual, which was nothing short of a game changer, as it meant that players could easily string together a series of tricks to create one massive combo. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2 very quickly kick-flipped its way into the hearts of critics and players alike, and was lauded for its tight, fun and addictive gameplay, massive levels, and banging soundtrack, which featured tracks from the likes of Papa Roach, Bad Religion, and Rage Against the Machine, and helped to shape the music taste of rock-loving youngsters the world over. Number 2, Grand Theft Auto 5, 2013, Xbox One, 98.33%. Missing out on the top spot by a mere 0.67% is 2013's Grand Theft Auto 5, the 7th and most recent entry into Rockstar's Steely Wheely Automobile franchise. Set in the fictional state of San Andreas, which you'll no doubt remember from earlier in this very list, GTA 5 centers on 3 different criminal boys: Michael, a retired bank robber, Franklin, a street gangster, and Trevor, a drug dealer and gun runner. Over the course of the game's story, the trio engage in a variety of heists, all whilst under pressure from other criminals and corrupt government officials. GTA 5 takes place in an expansive open world, which players can explore in whatever way they see fit. Naturally, it's the main questline that progresses the game, but that's not all there is to do, as San Andreas is filled with side missions, activities like scuba diving and base jumping, and even a stock market where players can make a little extra cash. Not only did GTA 5 garner universal critical acclaim for everything from its audio-visual presentation to its flawed but likeable protagonists, it also went on to become the second best-selling video game of all time, and to this day, or at least the day our writer was penning this script, has only been outsold by Minecraft. Before we get to the game that's in the number 1 spot, we'd like to A, thank you for sticking with us this far, and 2, remind you that this list is based purely on average review scores held by aggregators, game rankings, and Metacritic. So if your favourite game isn't in the top spot, then please don't yell at us. Are you ready to find out what the greatest game of all time is? Then let's get to it.
Number 1. The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time, 1998, Nintendo 64, 99%. Boasting a staggeringly high average review score of 99 out of 100, The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time is, according to critics, the very best game that's ever been made. Ocarina of Time serves as a pivotal point in the Legend of Zelda chronology, as it's the final story before the timeline splits into 3 different strands. The hero is defeated timeline, the hero is victorious child-era timeline, and the hero is victorious adult-era timeline.
The story tells of Link's struggle against Ganondorf, who has taken over Hyrule, and his attempts to find the 7 sages, the only ones with the power to imprison Ganondorf in the Sacred Realm. This is a Legend of Zelda game, so players can expect the usual dungeon exploration, puzzle solving, and fighting, but with a twist. At the beginning of the game, Link is given an ocarina, which is later replaced by the titular Ocarina of Time, and he can use it to play melodies that help him solve puzzles and allow him to teleport to previously unvisited places. Man, wish I had one of those for my morning commute.
Of the 22 publications that reviewed Ocarina of Time, 18 gave it a perfect score, and the remaining 4 all bestowed it with scores in the 90s. The depth and detail of the graphics, sense of scale, gameplay, side quests, and controls all received stacks of praise, and just about the only thing that anyone could find to complain about was retro-sounding audio samples. Basically, if you don't mind that it sounds a little old school, then Ocarina of Time is the perfect video game. So here's to you, The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time. May your excellence be an inspiration to video game developers the world over. Bravo!